Lost is over, but we have to go back down the hatch here on RHAP. We know scripted TV, and we know some of you have never seen Lost before, but you're now watching Lost for the very first time, or else you finally want to know what the hell happened on Lost and not have to watch it yourself and just hear a couple of podcast friends talk about it. Well, you are in the right place either way, because this is the Lost for First Timers podcast series where season by season, podcast by podcast, we are guiding you through all of Lost. I'm Josh Wigler. I'm joined here by Mike Bloom. Mike Bloom, you ready to push the button for the next 108 minutes?
Absolutely. We are two guys. We have not donned our hazmat suits as of yet, but we're going to do what we've been doing for the past 5 years, which is sitting here pressing
Talking about
buttons
Lost
every 108 minutes. And now that's a reference that these fans can understand. I feel like every single season, Josh will be able to say, okay, and now you understand the meme. And
we get
that's
to pile more intel on the further and further into this thing we go. And it is indeed a very exciting time here on the internet as Down the Hatch has returned, and it is in its new home here on RHAP, the RHAP
New hatch,
network.
who this?
New hatch, who dis? We are in the RHAP We Know Scripted TV podcast feed, which you should subscribe to if you have not done so already. Rob has a website.com/scripted, has all of the information for how to subscribe to RHAP We Know Scripted TV, as well as all the information for how to watch us on YouTube. Mike Bloom and I are officially doing Down the Hatch on video now. So if you want the video versions and you could see Mike Bloom spaghetti dancing for yourself, you can come on in. Rob has a website.com/We Know Scripted. Of course, you can just search.
Is that the effect that when Jack accidentally cut into the Dural sack, it was just this all the way out?
Yeah, just angel hair pasta just flowing all over the place. So RHAP, We Know Scripted TV, wherever you get your podcasts. Also search for Lost Down the Hatch wherever you get your podcasts if you want the specific Down the Hatch podcast feed, and become one of the hatchlings alongside Mike Bloom and myself and a great community of folks who love Down the Hatch. We need to get a new Down the Hatch community hub going, I think, Mike Bloom. Maybe we can work on that between seasons 2 and 3. We are banking these first few podcasts, and the third one will be after people have listened to this podcast, actually, is when we're going to record it. So if you got any feedback, we certainly want to hear it. Down the Hatch, RHAP@gmail.com. But I imagine, Mike, people are like, I want a community, a place where I can be talking about Lost for the first time. We can work on that. I think we can get that going by the season 3 podcast. So stay tuned for news on that front.
Yeah, listen, we have our main group of hatchlings that have been with us since the beginning, but then we have sort of like the tailies, people that come in at the tail end, if you will, of
gosh, I hope it works out better for them than it did for 2 of the tailies and like all the other tailies except for 2 here in season 2. It was a really, really rough ride. And as a reminder, we are not giving you any Lost spoilers past season 2 in this podcast, but everything from season 1 and now everything from season 2 is officially fair game. So if you have not watched through the season 2 finale, you want to do that before you listen any further, or you are one of the people that I mentioned at the start of this podcast and you're just trying to listen to Lost for the first time. This is a good spot to do that, Mike.
Yeah, so Lost season 2, a game changer in a number of ways. Again, I cannot speak highly enough about how much the first season went over like gangbusters. It won the Emmy. It attracted, even though the season 2 premiere will be the most watched episode in the show's history, it was building off the back of, again, this highly acclaimed first season that was built all around this delicious character ensemble piece with all the mystery box elements contained therein. And so a lot of people asked, how are they going to follow it up? And again, I'm not going to say too much about what's to come, Josh, but I would say either the good or maybe not so good news, depending on what you thought about Lost Season 2, is that certainly in the moment, and I think from your perspective as well as mine as well, reviewing this via Down the Hatch back in the day, Lost Season 2 regarded as definitely one of the lesser seasons.
Well, it was just such a change. It's such a change of pace where season 1 is this island adventure and everybody trying to figure out how to survive this place and guys, where are we and all of that. And in season 2, we don't still have an answer for like, guys, where are we? But we
Yeah.
now have an answer for the biggest question leaving season one, which is what's down the hatch. Aside from a podcast, now you know the answer. And through that answer, we're kind of opening Lost up to more almost like classic science fiction with the
Yeah.
introduction of the Dharma Initiative as a concept. I think that the viewer's journey in the real time, and I don't know what it feels like as a first timer binging the show might be, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's similar to what John Locke experiences across season two. Hurley is typically like thought of as a lost audience surrogate in season one, but I think in many ways, Mike, Locke is the audience surrogate for season two. It's like, really? We're just gonna be in a basement pushing a button for the whole ass season, and like, really, you're gonna show me a map of the island, and I've got 5 seconds to like write it down. Like, you know, we're gonna have to watch that again. Is Locke's quote in this season, and so I think like it's a very, very different vibe from season one. Locke, who is sort of like the island mystic man in season one, is really frustrated with season two as well. So I think like art imitates life a little bit.
Artist imitates life.
Artist imitates a pile of goo. And so like whether or not you're into that is totally up to you. I know some people who think season two is the best season. I know some people who think season two is the second worst season. Probably not the worst. And I think for me in the real time, this was such an exciting season of TV to watch and theorize on, because I was all the way down the hatch with Lost at this point. But this was a moment where like people were like, I don't know how much further I want to go with it. So viewership does start to decline at this point.
Yeah, and I think as well there is some new blood injected in the form of the tailies and main characters between Ana Lucia and Echo and Libby, as well as some other random faces that will show up. Of course, we'll talk about one Desmond David Hume, who really makes the beginning and the end of this season.
A certain bug-eyed twerp named Henry Gale.
Yes, exactly. So there's a lot of interesting stuff going on. Like this season, to your point, season one was kind of answering those like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, especially early on of, okay, we crashed on an island. We need to find food. We need to find water. We need to find rescue. It's a little muddied now. You know, we're going to embrace the food situation in an earlier episode, but otherwise, all the bare necessities are taken care of. You know, the raft, Michigas is kind of like quite literally blown up any chance of getting rescued. And so we're going to have our characters scattered to the winds a bit more as well. We're going to have really a few separate camps for the first part of this season as we divide up storylines here.
For better and for worse, right?
Exactly, yeah. And then as we sort of continue on some of these storylines with some of our main characters, both on and off island, again, for better and for worse, we're going to bring in some of these new characters that, again, do inject some fresh blood into things. But it's just such an interesting season as well, and that it does feel like a very transitional period. We'll talk about this more with season 3 and how that season in particular prepped the show for a landing.
Yep.
It's really interesting to look back on season 2, where they are very much in this mode, I think, of kind of building the plane as it flies and trying to figure out what events they want to bring into the season when. And yeah, it's a little bit of a visual stark difference to go from primarily being set in the wild, in the jungle of mystery in season 1 to like being in an underground bunker for the majority of season
now. 2. They've got a washing machine, you know, like
a stationary bike or had one before it ended up getting obliterated by the electromagnetism.
They have a computer, you know.
Stop all the downloading. Walt's downloading too many games.
Walt's downloading way too much, by the way. So yeah, but I think that this is also a season that's like sort of an announcement to the audience. And I think the announcement basically is like, hi, this is what Lost is like. You're in or you're out. And so like, I do think if you get through season 2 and you're still feeling like you're really vibing with Lost, then you're in a very good spot. But I think if you get through season 2 and some of this stuff with like the Dharma Initiative, the additional island lore that comes from that, I would say stick around still, just because I do think that the show rewards the investment. But I also do think that like if you're not really feeling what they're throwing your way here in season 2, this show may not be for you because I do think that there is a lot more of this kind of thing that exists the deeper we get into the show. It'll always be an island show, but it will also be, to some extent, it's a science fiction show too. And it's evidenced right here as we kick off, as we launch into the very first episode of season 2, Mike, in the aptly titled Man of Science, Man of Faith. It's
look at this prison Mike ass look for Jack in this picture.
Science fiction versus faith fiction? I don't know. But yeah.
Well, if you're L. Ron Hubbard, it's a little bit of both.
It's a little bit of both. Man of Scientology.
I don't know. Man of Faith Hill. Looking at the Lost cast to see who's maybe gotten their thetans tested anytime soon.
I'm not terribly interested in giving that a deep dive. Enough Losties and Lost-related people have been canceled, and my heart can only take so much.
We're actually going to tuck into some police bases this season.
We may get into that a little bit here. Okay, so season 2 begins. And again, as we mentioned in last week's podcast, Mike, we spent the summer, those of us watching in the real time, like agonizing for 3 months of like, what's down the hatch? And we were like recruiting our friends, all this stuff to watch the show. I had a couple of friends who became like hedonistic Lost fans. I don't think that that's exactly what I'm trying to say.
Really,
they would watch Lost
your own audience.
Like they would just like really go nuts. But like hugely, like the Lost faithful for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And then there were the people who just hopped in at season 2 when they were done with their summer-long binge, and they didn't have to have the 3-month agonizing wait. Now everybody just got to watch the season 1 finale and go straight into the season 2 premiere. So maybe you can imagine what those 3 months were like as we tried to figure out what's down the hatch, only for the show to tell you immediately what's down the hatch is a man. It's a man named Desmond, as we will come to find out in short order, whose sole existence is to live in this underground bunker, pushing a button, entering the numbers 4, 8, 15, 16, 23, 42 into a computer every 108 minutes, or else apparently the world will explode.
Or at least a plane will crash.
He has an exercise bike. He has fruit smoothies.
Record player.
He's got a record player. Make your own kind of music.
Oh, the Wandas and the Papas.
The Wandas and the Papas. He's got like steroids. I don't know. There's like some sort of quarantine measures that are in place.
But is it all a placebo at the end of the day?
And so like it's such a clever opening where you're not really sure what's going on, and then there is like the sound and the feel of the dynamite that has exploded on the hatch at the end of season 1, and Desmond in his suit goes running to see what happens, and we pan up and we get the continuation of that final shot of season 1, and now you know what's down the hatch. This was a huge crowd pleaser in my apartment watching Lost for the first time.
I mean, it is one of the crowning achievements of WTF in Lost, to the point where it kind of does make the music, if you will, of a lot of our season premieres moving forward, where we're going to get some sort of establishing piece that has you settled in some sort of reality, only to find out that it's a different way connected to the reality that we know. That we're just thinking, okay, here is this man. What could he be a part of? Is this another flashback? And then it turns out that no, this is all connected to the hatch. And as we'll find out in this episode, this is somebody that does have a bit of a connection to one of our characters. Should we use this time now, Josh, to talk about Desmond's story, or should we wait until the finale?
I mean, I think we'll get much more of it in the finale, but I think what's exciting is this guy who is such a big part of the first 3 episodes and is the answer to the question of like, what's down there, turns out to be a dude, a character.
It's not what's down the hatch, it's who's
down the hatch. And I will say that like one of the pieces of advice that I will give to you as a first timer watching Lost is a lot of the time I think like the questions are like what caused the plane to crash? We didn't even put that on our list of questions, which is a faux pas on our part.
Yeah, we have Jack in the premiere, right, showing off how skilled he is with his aviation knowledge of talking about, we hit this pocket at 50,000 feet.
Like, what caused the plane to crash? What's down the hatch? The answer to those questions can be also just like parroted back. Well, actually, you asked the wrong question. The question should have been, who crashed the plane? who's down the hatch? And so the Who, not featured in the soundtrack of Lost at any point in time, unfortunately, as far as I can recall.
I mean, I think I would imagine that Drive Shaft would probably be like, no, we're the only bloody English rock band to appear majorly on the show.
I feel like a Drive Shaft cover of Pinball Wizard would be sick. But that's often a great way of like trying to like develop your own theories out. I think is like some advice that I would give you. Like, what are the others? Who are the others? I think is a really interesting question. So Desmond sort of opens that up that like, okay, the answer to this major mystery was a character, the introduction of a new character. And he's gone after 3 episodes, but mercifully very, very, very much back by the season 2 finale. And I think like the most important thing to talk about with Desmond right now, Mike, is what you alluded to and what the YouTube version of this podcast is showing you visually, which is Matthew Fox with a ridiculous wig.
He has a terrible, terrible wig. This is a flashback to pre-wedding. This is how he meets your mother in the form of Sarah, or mother in general, because of the way that Julie Bowen is regarded nowadays. And as a result, they decided to put a young, foppish wig on Matthew Fox.
It's unbelievable, just to signify that he is young. We didn't really talk about how they do that with Terry O'Quinn as well, but the wig work on Lost is phenomenal, and obviously I am partial to that as a wig myself. So with Jack, what you're seeing here is him sitting next to Desmond, that these two had an encounter off island prior to either of them coming to the island. And it's really just sort of continuing to enhance the notion that some of these backstories may be intermingled a little bit. We talked about this with Sawyer and Christian having the meeting at the bar.
Hell, we're going to talk about it in this episode, as it turns out later on in the season, that Jack has a choice between saving a man and a woman, and the man is Shannon's father.
Yeah, so this was another one, like within this very episode, quietly, there is this moment where Jack is crossing paths with a different character who's going to come to the island. So it's just further strengthening the themes that, like, are they all here for a reason? Like, why are they all here? I think is a great question to add to the board, is why are they all here? And I think like that is being really underlined by the fact that there are all of these different coincidences, and a few that are not revealed in season 2, but maybe highly hinted at, I think is a way to put it. So these first 3 episodes really all kind of blend together.
Yeah, it's a little Rashomon-esque in that it all does take place over the same evening. So just to go over the plot of this episode from the island perspective, it takes place in the immediate aftermath of Exodus, where now Jack, Kate, Locke, Hurley, they've blown open the hatch, and Jack's like, all right, stay up here. We got to figure out how to get down there and start a search party and all that. And Kate and Locke are like, yeah. And then when Jack leaves, they're like, yes, let's go down there right now. You know, like they are 2 dumb bitches telling each other exactly. I'm like, yeah, you know what? I think we could go in there. You know, Locke's going to go down there. Kate's going to go down there and lets out a scream. And there's this brilliant flash of white light. But that's the last we see of them. And Jack does eventually decide to go down there after his party. And he finds Kate, Kate being held at gunpoint. And through one key word, brother, it turns out that this was a man that Jack had run into in a flashback, where, going briefly to the flashback, he saves this woman, Sarah's life, from a devastating car accident, but she is told she cannot walk again. But Jack, remember, he loves to fix things. He doesn't know how to let things go, is insistent of like, no, I'm going to make sure that she can do it, that she can dance on her wedding day, despite everyone telling her that's not the case, despite in one of the oddest cameos in retrospect, Anson Mount, Captain Pike, showing up, Black Bolt, unfortunately opening his mouth here and just saying things as an absolute douche canoe of Sarah's previous boyfriend. Jack doesn't know what to do. He's like sort of getting out his feelings by running up and down the stairs of a stadium. And as he hurts himself, he happens to run into this mysterious man that we'll later know as Desmond, who sort of talks about the idea of running away from faith. And all you have to do is just lift it up.
You have to lift it up, is what Desmond says.
And not only that, Sarah's going to be able to show that she can not only lift her feet up, but much more, as it turns out that, the impossible has seemed possible. Sarah is now able to walk, and this will start the beginnings of a relationship that will eventually lead to him walking her down the aisle.
These first 3 episodes, there's definitely a thought that like maybe it could have been 2. Like maybe could have been like condensed a little bit, but like some major moments are going to happen across these three, and I think treating them like something of a movie is a good way to look at it, like a really
It's a
big
really
event.
3-hour movie.
It's sort of like a 3-hour film. I know I just said the thing that all TV critics get really angry about, so I apologize for that. My membership revoked. But I think like one of the genres is horror, and like Jack exploring the hatch for the first time is so scary and so spooky, and like the music suddenly blaring and the light going off on him, even to Desmond saying, "Move, or I'll blow her bloody head off, brother." It's just such an incredible moment. But the story continues and shifts focus to not just John and Kate and seeing what's happening. Plus 8, 15, 16, 242.
Oh, Lord. Poor Kate.
A lot of kids. 40 talk to mom. I don't think that quite works.
40 taco mom.
40 talk to mom. 100 in octomom. I don't know. It's not just them, and we'll talk a bit about them, but I think we could probably move them to the episode 3 conversation. The much bigger deal is Michael and Sawyer and what has happened on the other side of Walt getting taken and the raft exploding, and how the hell are they going to get themselves out of this situation. And I am certain that as we were talking about season 2 in its entirety, Adrift probably hits a little different knowing where Michael's story is going. So as a fellow Michael, I ask you, Mr. Bloom, what your thoughts are on Harold Perrineau's story arc here for season 2 as it's introduced in Adrift, and how it's going to chart out and things that you would look out for here, other than trying to count how many times he says, "Whoa!"
Yeah, they really, back in the days before social media was even really a thing, sometimes the writers were leaning into the meme when it came to Lost. We'll talk about maybe a couple of other instances of those meta moments down the line in this entire journey. But yeah, I mean, Michael's storyline was kind of, for lack of a better term, adrift. And we'll talk about this with characters like him and Sawyer as well, that it sort of is, okay, we had this sort of overarching thing of Michael wants to be able to build this raft to leave the island. What does he do now? Sawyer starts the season as an asshole, and now we're starting to get to know him a bit more. What does he do now? And so putting the two of them together, I mean, I think especially watching it through for the first time, this is maybe one of our first, what I coined nothing burger episodes, where the entirety of the main action is going to be these two guys floating on remnants of the raft.
Shooting at a shark.
Yeah, shooting at a shark and arguing with each other. And even the flashback has, at least from my perspective, a devastatingly beautifully acted scene where, Michael officially loses custody of Walt and has to say goodbye to his 1-year-old son for the last time until he ends up seeing him in Australia. But I think, as you've talked about and as we talked about at the time, it does really interestingly set up Michael's arc here, which is that he's going to break bad a little bit. And he's almost the opposite of Walter White in that he didn't do it for himself. He did it for his family.
Yeah.
In that he is going to find out that the others have kidnapped his son. He is going to eventually, once he ends up, reuniting with everybody, make his way out into the jungle to try to find the others, to try to bargain, to get some sort of negotiation to get his son back. He does find one in the form of Miss Clue, as we kind of get a little bit of a catch up and some clues given to us in the form of 3 minutes. And it will lead him to do, one of the most brutal things a character has done up to this point, but also producing the best episode of the season in 2 for the Road, where he
kill people.
Yeah, he kills people in cold blood to get his son back. And it seems like, he is able to get what he wants at the end of the day. Henry Gale does give him and Walt access to leave the island. Easy as that. But the look that the two of them give to, the 4 people that are tied up on the dock definitely shows that perhaps the ends do not justify the means.
Yeah, one of the things I was reflecting on before we hit record on the podcast today was Michael's journey, because I'm such a Harold Perrineau fan. I don't remember if I had said this before on either of the previous podcasts, but like I was a huge fan of Oz. He's the narrator on Oz, Romeo plus Juliet. He's so great as Mercutio. He's just such a good actor. The Edge, he's an underrated component of that. So I was so excited that he was here on Lost, and I was very invested in him as a character. And I remember my friend and I thinking that like season 2 is going to be Michael's season. How can it not be? How can he not like rise to be like sort of the protagonist of the season? They just took his son and it just goes a very different, darker direction. And
Yeah.
I was reflecting on like, what is Michael like in Adrift compared to where he is at the end of the season? In both instances, he's on the ocean, away from the island. But I think in Adrift, here he is adrift, unsure of what he can possibly do, let alone to like survive the night. Saving his son is all he can think about, but he has to survive the evening and somehow get back there and, try and find a lead. And so he must feel like he's in hell. Like, this is how much worse can this possibly get? And it's so fascinating that he's going to leave the season with Walt. And it turns out maybe hell is a little bit deeper, that there's further to go. So I think Michael's story being adrift throughout season 2 is kind of apt. This episode initially was conceived of as a Sawyer flashback episode.
Yes.
In the filming of it, it didn't work. They were filming the flashback components for Sawyer, and for whatever reason, they decided this wasn't a great fit. So it's after the fact, shoehorned into being a Michael episode. So if it feels like a little bit like nothing burgerish, as Mike likes to say about some of these kinds of episodes, that's part of why Adrift is relatively low on our list of favorite episodes. But it does get us further into The Hatch, which gets us to Orientation, the first John Locke episode of season 2, Mike, and a huge, huge, huge episode for the mythology of Lost.
In many ways, and a big character episode as well, as we talk about how Jack ends up meeting his mate. A lovely woman walks into head full of hair John Locke's life in a flashback in the form of Katie Seagal as Helen. And unfortunately, we'll see later on that maybe, things will not go incredibly well for the two of them, at least at the point where we leave John in the past in season 2. But yeah, it's a nice check-in with the character. Adrift, they sort of do, again, some Rashomaning of like, and this is what Kate and Locke experienced when they went inside the hatch. But now we're officially going to pick up from where Man of Science, Man of Faith left off. There is going to be a little bit of a firefight as Jack and Desmond are going to engage in a little bit of a standoff that causes the destruction of this big computer, which causes Desmond to flee in abject terror. And then immediately, Josh, we are going to jump into the fact that the watch is now unoccupied and we're going to have some people to step up.
Yeah, so we are going to find ourselves in a position where the Losties have jobs. They're not officially Dharma
Even
Initiative.
they couldn't escape from capitalism on a desert island.
They're not officially part of the Dharma Initiative or anything like that, Mike, but they are tasked with executing a Dharma Initiative holdover because Desmond was down here for 3 years doing the thing. He leaves as if hell is about to erupt from the ground. And Locke certainly believes that he was drawn to the hatch for a reason. And so it becomes, it ends up being Jack's call. Locke is like, I need you to join me. Take a leap of faith. And Jack reluctantly is going to sign on to the project. And as a result,
it's a two-man job.
We have all of season 2 to like sort of like wonder this question about like, are they actually doing anything, or is this just a project? Is this just like a science class, psychological experiment?
Are they just rats in a maze for cheese?
And by the end of season 2, I think an underrated component of season 2 is that like season 2 introduces a huge question like this of like, is the button actually doing anything? By the end of season 2, it's really clear that, the button was doing something. So like, we don't even have to put on our list of season 2 questions, like, what is the button doing? It seems like the button was preventing like electromagnetic catastrophe. As we're going to find out that this is what's responsible for the plane crashing, at least that's an interpretation of it by the end of the season. So seeing this guy, seeing this man, Dr. Marvin Candle, I believe is how he introduces himself here. With this, has anyone noticed like his arm seems like, like one of his arms is very animated. Other arm seems like it's really kind of just
Yeah, I
like
don't know how many spaghetti arms he's doing in that
he's
video.
not doing too many spaghetti arms. But the orientation video and seeing a couple of more appearances of this guy across the season, this was another one of those things that like people just like really studied rather closely.
So that's the thing. Locke is going to say the iconic quote in this episode. We're going to need to watch that again. And this was the season that we all pretty much wore out the pause and rewind buttons. Now, there were a couple of exceptions when that happened in season 1. Like, for example, we talked about it in Exodus. If you trying to freeze frame when the monster appeared to see, okay, is it made of smoke? What's going on there? But there is so much world building that is baked into this, 3-minute video. But there's even more questions left, not even from the stuff that's set up as to like, wait a minute, this is a hatch. Who is this guy? What's the Hanso Foundation? What is the Dharma Initiative? But they even nest questions within the questions when we have, for example, a little skip in the film that will end up being brought up later on once we end up getting sort of the uncut footage. And so
again, like another instance of like, oh, what's up with the missing clip? Like we don't even have to put that on the list of a season 2 question because that'll be answered, right? Like we see the skip, we get the skip filled in.
Yeah, though there still is a question of what is the incident, right?
Right.
Dr. Marvin Candle says,
why don't we jot that down? What is the incident is a very good question.
Because it sounds like we were about to cause another one by the end of this
season. Who is the incident? That is a band title for Drive Shaft that Charlie and the gang ultimately shot down. But the incident, I would rock out to.
Yeah, so again, it's going to come down to, ironically enough, despite this not being Man of Science, Man of Faith, that showdown between the two of them. And Jack says at the end of Exodus, we're going to have a Locke problem. And this season really does set up the Jack versus Locke rivalry. Though in this moment, as they're, yelling at each other, as this ominous countdown timer is happening in the distance, like, how can you be so sure that this will work? How could you not be sure, et cetera, et cetera? Jack finally does decide, even if it's just a social experiment, that he is going to take on the mantle of this 2-man job. Though, as we're going to find out as immediate as next episode, it's not going to just be a 2-man job. We're going to have people regularly going inside and outside of the hatch throughout the entirety of season 2.
So we get our first gig in the form of Everybody Hates Hugo, which is a very early, mercifully, Hurley Reyes flashback episode where Hurley is charged with like handing out the food, rationing out the food because they've suddenly come across so much food. And it's like testing his role as social chair of the island because Charlie, who's taken it upon himself to be Aaron's surrogate father, that goes well. It's like, I hear you got some peanut butter. Why don't you give it to us? He like wants all this shit, and
this is the beginning of maybe. If
Charlie has a bad season 2.
Yeah, if we're talking about a tumultuous season for Michael, I think it really is a contest as to like whether it's a worse season for Michael or for Charlie.
At least with Michael, I think it's compelling. Charlie's is a little less compelling to me.
Well, let's talk about, speaking of Michael, though, something we obfuscated slightly in episode 3 that comes to more of a focus in episode 4. Because at the end of Adrift, despite it being maybe a bit of a meh episode, we do get an interesting ending where Sawyer and Michael show up on a beach and Jin ends up running up, tied up, saying, udders, udders. And we look in the distance.
And a bunch of cows with just huge ass udders are just like marching forward, wiggling their tummies.
And so they decide to start a steakhouse on the island. And it's just a profitable chain. And the storyline. No, it turns out that
Sawyer Steakhouse.
These are not others. These are other people in the recognition of the show. These are what are known affectionately as the tailies. These are the people that, as we'll find out in a future flashback episode, ended up surviving from the back half of Oceanic 815. And they have parallel, yet a little perpendicular to the journey of our fuselage survivors. They have kind of forged their own society, headed up by one Michelle Rodriguez as Ana Lucia Cortez, who we got an introduction to in the season 1 finale.
Yeah. So Michelle Rodriguez is really in the mix now. And she has initially she pitches herself as somebody who's been caught by the others and tries to say that the tailies are the others because they think that these 3 guys are the others.
Can we explain this inside joke, Josh, just for a brief second?
Well, then there's also after she reveals herself and then she's she yells at Mr. Echo to let her out. She says, coming out.
Yeah, so
And
phonetically, that's all one word, and it's spelled like COMI, all lowercase, capital N, capital G, capital O, UT. So you got to really like almost slur the latter part of the first word into the first part of the second
coming
word.
out, coming out. Yeah. So we always loved that on Down the Hatch, and coming out came along for the ride as we continued talking about it. But there's a lot to say about the tailies. The only thing I want to add on Everybody Hates Hugo, which is like a vibes episode. You find
Yeah.
out what it was like the night he got his money. And so this is also probably like a good indicator of like,
Oh,
what are the flashbacks going to be like now that we've sort of introduced these characters? The answer to that is hit and miss. Like of varying degrees of importance. I think that this is like a really good vibes flashback for Hurley, though. I do think, and it's not in this season, that there's a better one coming up by a lot. I think that like it's hard to be mad. Like you get DJ Qualls
yeah,
here,
as his random friend Johnny, who, not to spoil too much, is one and done in his
Yeah, we'll never
appearances
see
on
Johnny
Lost.
again. But we get Johnny for one night only, and we get Cluck You, written
Have a
out.
cluckety cluck cluck day, Hugo.
So like there's
The weird like Twin Peaks stream where Jin's talking English.
totally 100%. But I think the thing that I love about this is like again like. I think Hurley is such an obviously fun character, and he's at the heart of a lot of fun. But this season, you'll see him at the center of some drama as well. He gets a love storyline. It ends tragically. He is in like a dire position by the end of it, albeit released by the end of it. But I think like it all speaks to this idea that for me, Hurley is not a character to just take as a joke. I think like Hurley is a great character when you take him seriously as well, and you really lean in when the show leans in on that as well. And while like they do like some like fat shaming storylines with Hurley that I particularly really don't love that much. And here he's in charge of the food. Okay, fat guy's in charge of the food is like a big thing on the show here. I think that like what's underneath that Hurley is having to make a really big survival decision for the greater group. And he ultimately makes like a decision that's not about like rationing it out and surviving in that way because they determined they really can't do that. It's more about like survival of the spirit. And let's give ourselves like a really, really great night where we're just going to party hard. We've earned this reward challenge. The full tribe wins.
Wow, what an old era methodology.
And I think that's important. I think like Hurley making those kinds of calls, I think is just like a really fun thing to track if you're invested in Hurley's storyline, which Mike and I both are on a very deep level. Okay, so then we should go to Ooh and Found, which again is a Jin and Sun episode. It is ... and found. So this is just how we phonetically pronounce it is Ooh and Found.
Unfortunately, the last time they will do this. They say
It is
comedy works in 3s, but Lost stopped at 2. Could have gone to 4, honestly.
So this is, another episode. Season 2 has got a lot of these episodes that are like, okay, could we have done like, I think season 2 feels like probably the season of Lost. Maybe season 3 feels this way a bit as well, of like inspire some of the questions of like, what if it were made today in the era where we get like 13 episodes feels like a lot to a season. And here we've got 22, 23 hours of Lost across these next, this season and next. And Found would go, I think, because really And Found's whole reason to exist is to continue Michael going into the jungle screaming, "Whoa!" looking for Walt. It's a buddy pairing between Jin and one of the tailies who is going to be a huge deal this season, Mr. Echo. And it's also an excuse to show you some others' feet.
Yeah, so that was the big
Quentin Tarantino's favorite episode of Lost.
Oh, him, Rex Ryan, they were lighting up the group, the GCs that night. Yeah, this is the big mythological takeaway is that, so this group of tailies, they ain't doing so good. And again, we're going to find out the extremity of their plight in a future episode, but their group has really winnowed down. They are living in another hatch called the Arrow, which is like night and day. It's like the Survivor Fiji haves versus have-nots compared to the Swan, which is the name of the hatch that is the main setting of season 2 of Lost. And so Michael's just going to say, F it. They have been let out of the tiger trap. They have been welcomed into this group relatively. And so Michael's going to strike off on his own. He's going to go try to find Walt. And so it's going to end up being a search party, which is, again, Jin and this mysterious man who similarly does not talk a lot, but it's not because he doesn't speak English. That's just the way he is in Mr. Echo. And so basically, like,
Another Oz alum. So
yes.
I was so excited to see Adewale Akinoye Ekabaje, aka Adebisi from Oz, live on as Mr. Echo here, who I think should come as no surprise to the people who have binged season 2 that this dude, a fairly instant fan favorite.
He was our MVP of
Yeah.
season 2, just because between all the badassery that he's able to bring, as well as a very compelling backstory, which we are going to get into. But the main play of this episode is mainly through the flashback, which is sort of the Jin and Sun meet cute. We really do get a little bit more of a digging in from Jin's last episode about how this really is a tale about two families from different sides of the tracks. That Sun, again, is the daughter of this big businessman, and she is kind of courting this young son of he's like a hotel heir, right? And he's the one that's going to start teaching her to speak English.
Mm-hmm.
And meanwhile, Jin is just trying to scrape by as a doorman at a hotel. But we'll see the two of them meet, as ironically enough, they are very much separated, and that's going to be one of the large unifying forces of these two characters, is the desire to unify. Really nothing to write home about on our main side of the island, in that, like, Sun loses her wedding ring. If we don't talk about it, we didn't talk about it earlier, but like one of the messages from the bottle from the raft washed ashore in like the first 3 episodes. And so now people are a little concerned, like, oh, did the raft even make it out of there? What happened to these people? I think the most, unfortunately, that contributes to this from a down the hatch Pantheon perspective is one particular scene, Josh, between
Yeah.
Jin and Mr. Echo.
Yeah. So this is a great recurring joke for us, but probably won't land as hard for the rest of you.
Just like any joke that requires explaining.
There is a moment where they're tracking Michael, and Jin has a cut, and Echo like gestures at like an aloe plant or whatever, and Jin says, "Michael," and he goes, "No, aloe for your cut," basically. And
Mhm.
so we just then imagined that Jin thought Michael could shapeshift into plants.
And then we assumed that Michael could also shapeshift into plants. And so, listen, I mean, he has a,
Anytime you see a tree on Lost, we assume that it's Michael. It's not as funny when you have to explain
well, it
it.
is interesting though, considering that he ends up kind of being a plant later on in the season,
Right,
right?
he
Where
is a
like,
plant of sorts, as we come to see. And so like Sun, she lost her wedding ring, and I think like sort of a big deal here is has it happened already that the messages in a bottle from the raft have
yeah,
washed up? So
that's what I just mentioned. Yeah.
right. So they have a sense that like shit's gone south for the rafties. If we haven't yet, I think like it's not a bad time just like to name a couple of the other tailies who we have
Hmm.
met. So we've talked about Mr. Echo. Anna Lucia is obviously their leader, played by Michelle Rodriguez. Libby, played by Cynthia Watros, who is established as a very compelling mystery character, only for her to go "pacow" later on in the season. And then there's Bernard,
Yes.
who is played by the great Sam Anderson, who at long last, Rose, who had had so much faith that her husband was alive, that faith is rewarded because Bernard the dentist is living among the tailies. So we'll talk about all of them further as we go. But first, somebody else goes, "Pacow!"
Yeah, Shannon's looking at that grave being like, ooh, looks real roomy. Be nice if there was another spot in there.
So sometimes Lost, I think the creative team, they're like, I think maybe we bit off more than we could chew. Or sometimes they're like, I don't know that that's really working out. And so often when like the audience feels that way, it tends to be that the creative team is feeling that way to a degree as well. And so the first casualty of that instinct is ultimately the pairing of Boone and Shannon. Boone gets killed by the end of season 1, and we have now reached the Shannon death episode
Yep.
just as she was getting really interesting, which is, I think, unfortunate.
Yeah, so this is the big Shannon-centric flashback episode. Of course, she does appear in Hearts and Minds, but in a very unsavory way. If you remember, she and her boyfriend help con Boone after out of a bunch of money, and then she sleeps with
So
him.
many con men, I'm telling you.
Yeah, and then she says, "Oh, never bring this up again." We find out that Shannon is living in a fractured family situation. Her father just died, and her stepmother, aka Boone's mother, sucks.
Sucks.
Sabrina Carla, she is cut off from the money that she would have gotten from her father. And so as a result, she has kind of like had to learn how to make her way in the world. And on Island, it's not going well for Shannon. She was a really fractured situation following the death of Boone. Her like one big moment in the 3-part Exodus finale is her just kind of like sitting there while Sun and Claire are talking to themselves with just this hopeless, nebulous look at the world, nihilistic, I should say, of
Yeah.
just like, it doesn't matter
Nothing
anymore.
matters.
They're
Yeah.
all coming to kill us. And Shannon started at the beginning of the season, the very first episode, is going to be seeing a familiar face.
Yes. So we have yet to mention the fact that there is like some sort of like ghost Walt. Like, what's going on with this sort of apparition of Walt? Because this is a question that we could put down that is not explained by the end
Yeah.
of season 2.
He appears to Shannon sopping wet, speaking backwards. Speak backwards. And
Yes.
so Shannon, especially in Abandoned, has a real crisis of faith of, am I going crazy right now? Has my grief just caused me to mentally unravel? Or is there something else going on? And it leads to this big climactic moment where she is out in the middle of the jungle with Saeed, and the rain is pouring down, and she sees Walt again, and Saeed does too. And it's a moment where the two of them are able to embrace around it, if only for a moment.
5 seconds, about 5 seconds, because Shannon goes off in pursuit of Ghost Walt, and she ends up colliding with a bullet.
No collisions next episode.
Because actually, there's one more in between.
Oh, yeah.
In the other half of the storyline of Abandoned, the tailies have decided, all right, well, we're sick of like living in like a subterranean bunker. We'd like to live in another subterranean bunker, which we don't know about yet. And they are going to have Sawyer, who is like dying.
Right, because he got shot, was able to successfully, though excruciatingly, dig the bullet out of himself.
He's like got like a gangrenous shoulder that's just gonna slowly kill him. And Jin, and so they're gonna be like, take us to your leader, basically. So they are on the path of going to Oceanic 815's beach, the greater 815. That we're going to get a little bit about that in the next episode as well, where they're going to try and reach the beach, and they only have a gun, and they've been traumatized by the others.
Not even a gun rack.
You know, they've been traumatized by the others, and Ana Lucia is just going to shoot whatever moves when the whispers start clocking in. And the first thing that she sees, unfortunately, is Shannon Rutherford, and she kills Shannon and Saeed with the murder look to close out the episode. But before we get to see what happens with the murder lurk, we go to the Earth 48 days.
Is that like the Hurley bird?
Mm-hmm, the Hurley bird. Yeah. Did that bird just say Hurley? We'll write that down as a question later on. The other 48 days, which breaks Lost's conventions for the very first time, it is still something of a flashback episode, but it is structured differently, where the entire episode is taking place further back in time, showing us what those 48 days were like for the tailies. And we get to see the others at work. We get to meet this one guy, Nathan, who we think is another, but oh, look out. It's like if Michelle Rodriguez and Goodwin, if Anna and Goodwin are sort of like the Jack and Kate here, then it's like if the love interest turned out to be the secret evil bad guy, because Goodwin turns out to be a bad one. He is another, and he gets killed. And we had seen his body a little while earlier, a couple episodes earlier. Another example of like, we'll set up stuff and answer it in just a couple. Lost has a reputation of not answering its questions. I think that's unfair. I think Lost sets up a lot of questions, so you can't answer them all. But it does set up a lot of questions that it does ultimately answer. Like, what happened to that guy? Turns out he got killed because he was a big piece of shit. He was another.
Yeah, and so this is a little bit of a record scratch. Turn off the mamas and the papas. Yep, this is me. You're probably wondering how I got here as we rewind from, again, this incredible climactic ending of Abandoned that sees only the second death of a major character on the show as of yet, to the epic plane crash from the tailies' perspective. And again, they say the grass is always greener, but good God, the fuselage people should be very happy they were not the tailies, because it is rough. They have, kids that end up getting kidnapped in the first couple of nights. Basically, every single night in the initial week or so, the others come in and take people. And luckily, Mr. Echo, who has taken a vow of silence up to that point, does end up beating a couple of them with some rocks. But it is very apparent to them, when it wasn't initially for our fuselage crew, that oh, they are prey right now, and they are being hunted. And so, whether it's due to those circumstances or Ana Lucia honestly being much more of a hardened personality than Jack Shepard, we're going to get into that starting as recently as next episode. It's a little bit more live or die with this. And so it's going to cause this like finger pointing scenario of who could be another. As you said, Nathan's a little bit of a red herring when it turns out that no, Goodwin is the one. And even though Ethan was incredibly creepy, I think Goodwin is definitely the scarier other in terms of like, he just flat out snaps Nathan's neck and
Yeah.
just flat out murders him. And he tries to kill Ana Lucia as well. And then the two of them end up wrestling on the hillside, and Goodwin ends up dying in the process. And so this and Collision, I think, combined to really nicely show like how at the end of her rope Ana Lucia is and how desperate the tailies are, that when they're going to get invited into the group overall, even though there is some initial hostility, obviously, it's going to be an upgrade no matter what.
A couple of things. One is that this episode answers a question that we had as a leftover from season 1, which is who's on the radio when Boone is in the Beechcraft and he says, we're the survivors of 815. And it sounds like Ian Somerhalder is saying back to him, we're the survivors of 815. I do believe that's how they filmed it. And then season 2 rolls around and they decide, no, it'll be the tailies. It's the tailies who are...
Bernard in particular.
It's Bernard in particular, who does not sound anything like Ian Somerhalder, but instead it's him. And I think a good example of like, I do think that like, Damon Lindelof and Carlton Cuse, who did podcasts about the show, they were real pioneers in the space. And they were very open in a lot of ways about like interacting with the fandom and talking about Lost and giving some answers or at least addressing theories and things like that. But they would also say like, we got the whole thing planned. And that's probably exaggerating exactly how they said it, but they would like to really reassure people that they knew where this was going. And I think Mike and I both agree that like, we feel like they definitely knew major elements of where they are going, but a lot of other major elements also, I think, like are being modified as they go. And some which could be like categorized as like medium to like, like not extra large, but like medium to large, small, medium, and large moments are being constructed on the fly and being changed on the fly. So they introduced this idea of like, we're the survivors of 815. And maybe your thought is like, oh, that sounds like Boone clones or something like that. And instead it's just Bernard. Feels to me like something that like, it was a little like cutesy, right? Like I think they're being a little cute with the audience on some of that. That's going to happen. That's going to happen from time to time. But we do have an answer to that question at the very least.
Yeah, and I will say this is also, I believe, the first moment we have Mr. Echo obviously talking in previous episodes, but this is a big moment for these two characters where, like, after everything that's happened, Ana Lucia goes down to the river to be able to finally have that facade break and, get a little emotional. And Mr. Echo is the one to be there. And he talks to her for the first time and breaks his vow of silence that he basically took since he killed those two others on night 1.
Yeah, his spirituality is really starting to come into focus, which is going to be very interesting when we contrast that to his flashback for sure. Another tailie who we have not talked about is actually a character from season 1 that maybe people probably at this point have figured out, but maybe, not as much, is Cindy, who is the flight attendant on Oceanic 815, who gives Jack the bottles of alcohol.
Yeah,
and she's
not a very stiff drink.
Not a very stiff drink. And I think that in the previous episode, she gets taken and she goes missing. And so like, what's going on with her? She ends up kind of, I think, being like a poster child for like the tailies who are getting nabbed by the others. And I think like a question that I would put on the board, you tell me how you want to put this out there. It's like, what happened to Cindy and the other tailies, I think is maybe a question, but a maybe even bigger question is like, what's up with all your lists? Why are there like all these lists of like, this person can be taken, we want this person?
Goodwin tells Ana Lucia before they fight to the death, like, there was a list of good people and you were not on the list.
You're not on it. So like, why? What does that mean? And clearly, like, what did Bernard do? Did he like pull the wrong person's tooth? Like, this dude seems like a peach.
I mean, I think maybe whoever's in charge is an anti-dentite.
Anti-dentite, I think could be right. So other 48 days, groundbreaking episode. We get to Collision where the tribes merge, Mike.
Yes, hell of a merge episode. So yeah, this is going to take place basically just entirely in the aftermath of the end of Abandoned, where Ana Lucia, despite the fact that the other tailies are going to move ahead and go to the fuselage camp, she has kind of like purposely isolated herself because she has to deal with this entire thing of killing a person in cold blood. And in particular, Saeed, the embittered lover of the person that she just killed, possibly wanting to seek some revenge. And so we do get a moment that was 9 episodes in the making of having Jin and Sun reunite, of having Bernard and Rose reunite for the first time since the plane crash, even like Kate and Sawyer to a certain extent, something we'll get into later on in the season. But a lot of the action, both on island and off, is really just cracking into the complicated head of Ana Lucia.
Yeah. So we get Ana Lucia's flashback story, and Ana Lucia's story is going to be told in 2 flashbacks across this season. As we find out she was a police officer. We already kind of have that, but we find out that she was like removed from the force after she was shot. And in shock, it turns out that she is going to have been pregnant when she was shot. And so she goes and tracks down this utter douchebag, Jason McCormick. That's like the most South Park name on Lost.
Well, there's Kenny McCormick.
Yeah, Jason McCormick. Is he Kenny's like shitbag cousin? I don't know. But oh my God, they killed Jason. You heroes. So she's going to shoot Jason McCormick in the flashback, actually technically in the chest multiple times because he shot her while she was pregnant. And so she's carrying a lot of weight with her as she goes forward. And like, it seems like that was relatively recently before she gets on 815, right? Like not terribly long after that, she's going to team up with Christian, go through all of that. And so she's got a lot of trauma on top of the plane crash trauma. And she like kind of just like snaps here. She's like, I got to kill Saeed or this guy's going to kill me. And like everyone else is just like, nah, we're like close to the other people now. And like, it's been real, but peace out.
Yeah, and it's also an interesting low-key episode for Saeed, who will obviously have more focus later on in the season, but like he even remarks to Anna, if I remember correctly, like, oh, 40 days ago, I did the exact same thing to this other guy. I tied him to a tree and tortured him. So like, listen, do it. I deserve it. This is finally recompense for the sins I have committed.
Yeah, like Saeed is definitely somebody who I think like I deserve to be in hell is very much on his mind and has been for a long time. And so in this moment with Ana Lucia, like he just kind of like wants her to do that. And like she doesn't, she cuts him loose. And having been in the situation, like reuniting with Michael and Sawyer and like Jin and like getting the scoop basically on like what the situation is, I think he does like realize like this was an accident. This was like a bad friendly fire incident and like sucks. I'm not just like going to kill this person as a result. So he scoops up Shannon, goes through. We have like a little bit of island golf that happens here, like sort of brimming under the surface has been like Jack and Kate getting closer again, like with Sawyer absent. Jack is able to like, sort of like be more of an interesting person romantically, perhaps for Kate. So they're like having like a little bit of like a meet cute on the golf course that gets interrupted with Mr. Echo holding a dying Sawyer.
Not holding Diane Sawyer.
Holding Diane Sawyer. It's really weird that they get a journalist in the mix here. Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess we should move into the next episode because it's finally discovering, Josh, what Kate did to the point that they literally called the episode What Kate Did.
Yeah, I don't know that we've jotted down what did Kate do on our list of questions even, but here's an answer to that question if it was something you were wondering about. She murdered her like horribly abusive father.
Stepfather, I believe it is.
Stepfather, and blew his ass up. Blew him up and never looked back and started running from that moment for every day ever forward. Was about to get arrested for it pretty quickly, but she saw a horse.
Yep, she saw a black horse, which ends up, showing up to deter the first appearance of Edward Mars chronologically in Lost. So honestly, of course, we saw him in the previous season. And that horse will make its way onto the island, Josh. This is really a season of, I'm seeing this thing on the island. Is it real or is it not? As obviously, everyone is now sort of in the aftermath of the merge that happened between the tailies and the fuselage. Jin and Sun are going to get right to it. Like quite literally later that day. But the big thing is obviously trying to deal with Sawyer and the fact that he is sort of I wouldn't say at death's door, but it's not great. Thank goodness they found this underground bunker with all the medical supplies you could possibly need. But now Kate sees a big black horse standing in the middle of the jungle, and she is trying to figure out, and luckily, a less grave way than Shannon, exactly what's going on with her mental state.
Sure. It leads her literally into Jack's arms at one point. They
Mm-hmm.
have their first kiss. And like the music underneath it makes it feel like this is bad that they're kissing. Is sort of how, like, I don't think that that's necessarily the vibe that Lost wanted to go for here,
Right.
but it is the vibe that I get when I watch this scene. Is like, a kind of uncomfy watching these two kiss with Giacchino. Like maybe that was like Giacchino declaring like, I'm in on Sawyer and Kate.
Yeah, he was a
I'm
big
not
stage
here for
shipper.
Jack and Kate. Like I think Michael Giacchino, the composer, is tossing that out there. Mike, what's the question coming out of this episode then? Is it like what's up with the horse, or do you want to tie that into this greater idea of like why are people seeing things on the island that happened before they got here? Like,
Yeah,
how
I
do I
think
want
that's
to
a larger
phrase
thing
that?
because much like Saeed, Sawyer is eventually going to come too, and they go out into the middle of the jungle, and Sawyer basically says like, "You see that black horse, Freckles?" And
Right.
so it proves Kate's validity that again she is not slipping into some sort of fugue mental state. But there are a couple of questions actually from a mythological perspective to take away from this. One, not only are we getting a merging of people, but a merge of supplies in a way, and that Echo reveals that, hey, actually, there's this hollowed out part of a Bible that I've been
Right.
carrying around that has this random slice of footage from an old projector. And so him and Locke are now going to have their first of many team ups over the course of the season. This is where we get, I think, one of the most like useful quotes of Lost in "Do not mistake coincidence for fate," which again is what Echo provides, ironically enough, to John Locke. But the end of this episode also very interesting
The
in the
clip
arc.
says like, don't use a computer,
Yeah,
right?
as we cut to
Michael
Michael
using a
Dawson.
computer.
Yeah, very, him and Sawyer and Jin get immediately introduced to the hatch. This is where Jin finally gets his handcuff
Handcuff
removed.
is gone, which is nice.
And so Michael's just kind of typing away on the computer, having a chat with a smarter child, he thinks. And it turns out that, yes, it is a smarter child. It is one Walt. As he
Dad?
responds, "Dad?"
Dad?
And that's how the episode ends. And it's going to be something that spurs Michael along on his journey for the rest of the season.
Yeah, so it's provocative for sure that it seems like now the island doesn't just have dishwashers, the island doesn't just have washing machines, the island doesn't just have showers, the island doesn't just have computers, the island also has AOL Instant Messenger. He
To
is
show you it really took place in the fall of 2004.
indeed. I don't know if that's dial up or what. Should we have that as a question? Is like, what is the internet
Yeah.
capabilities
What's
here
the
on the
service going on there?
I'm not going to write that down. We get to a really big episode.
Mhm.
We have two Mr. Echo episodes here in Lost season 2. The first
Echosodes.
is the first of the episodes is the 23rd Psalm, in which for the very first time we see the monster in like a really big dedicated way. At the end
Mhm.
of season 1, we see like these little wisps of smoke and like what's going on with all of that. But here we see that like it's a lot more than just wisps of smoke. It's a whole ass freaking black cloud. And Mr. Echo is going to stare it all the way down.
So let's talk about maybe something that causes a different form of smoke. Let's talk about drugs,
Okay,
Josh,
sure,
because
sure.
so Echo is going to
Don't do
meet.
them.
Yeah, well, Echo is going to meet Claire, and Claire's like, "Oh, you're a priest. You should see my boyfriend, Charlie. He's got a bunch of Virgin Mary statues in his tent." And Echo's like, "Virgin Mary statues, huh? Oh, interesting." And we get one of our questions answered here, Josh. Hey, what was that little random yellow plane that killed Boone in the middle of the jungle last season? Where did that come from? It came from Echo as we get his flashback, and in true Lost fashion, there's a twist.
Yep.
Despite the fact that Echo came to the island dressed as a priest, he was anything but. We see that from a young age, he grew up in Nigeria with his brother Yemi, and one day, a bunch of warlords showed up and said, "Hey, Yemi, we're going to take you and groom you into becoming one of us," which is a future episode. But Echo says, no, I am my brother's keeper. I will be the one to step up. And so we see these two very divergent paths where Yemi is going to stay in town, become a man of the cloth, become very devout, and Echo is going to turn into this big warlord and a boss. And so it's really going to come to this head where Echo is going to proposition Yemi saying, okay, we need to smuggle drugs outside of Nigeria. We are going to use you as a cover where we're all going to dress up as priests. We're going to hide the heroin in Virgin Mary statues, and we're going to fly the plane out of the country. And after a little bit of strife between the two brothers, Yemi does allow it to go through, but it ends in tragedy as when Yemi tries to stop the proceedings on the airstrip, he is gunned down by some of the ops of Echo. As a result,
Yeah.
Yemi dies, is on the plane as it takes off, assumingly crashing on the island. And Echo is now mistakenly regarded as a priest because he happened to be dressed like one when everything went south.
Right. So that has happened, and like we know it was manufactured at least at that time, but here on the island he carries himself like a priest. So
And he carries a big stick.
and he carries a big stick. So what did that change for him? What did that unlock in him in his life? I think, and I use unlock very specifically because I think his story seems very linked to Locke. Like Locke's story in season 2 specifically feels like a man of faith who loses his faith, and I think with Echo is like this was. I don't know if he was a man of science, but he was like a man without faith who found it. And so I think there's sort of ships in the night in that way across season 2, which is a really compelling dynamic. And it leads to this really big moment where Echo is going to be confronted by the monster, which we can now call the smoke monster, I think is what it is more commonly referred to as. And there's a stare down, and like moments of Echo's life are like flashing within the cloud of the monster. So I think like this heightens.
Wow, you talk about was signal service.
I
Mean,
know.
they had the cloud going on and Lost.
I think like it heightens the question of what is the monster. I think like it further enhances that. I don't know like if we want like what's up with the flashes of your life that are within the monster as like a sub question, but that's complicated, so I'm not jotting it down. But I think a question that we didn't ask or at least put on our list in season 1 that I'd like to put here in sort of a combined way is the monster has seemingly made itself completely known to two characters. One is Locke, one is Echo. It's just that we get to see it with Echo, but Locke's experience is that we saw like monster cam ripping through the jungle and then like staring down at John. What Locke will tell Jack is, I looked into the eye of the island and what I saw was beautiful. Here's Mr. Echo having a similar moment that we as the audience now are invited to see in full. I don't know that I would describe this moment as beautiful so much as I would describe it as like arresting, chilling. So why is the monster interested in Echo and Locke? Lecco, that is a question that I'm putting down on the list that I think people should be wondering about.
Yeah, and the other big thing to take away from this episode,
Charlie's been caught.
Yeah, unfortunately, is that it's going to turn out that hey, there's heroin here, and it turns out that we don't see Charlie using, but he is certainly hoarding a bunch of these Virgin Mary statues, perhaps as just something to reflect upon in his tent.
Let's put a pin in that. We'll talk about it briefly very soon. First, a hunting party of 5, Mike. As Michael has been, he's been texting Walt. They've been iMessaging each other on the island. In the previous episode, in the 23rd Psalm, Michael learns how to shoot, which ends up really being bad for Ana Lucia and Libby later on.
Yeah,
and
luckily
really,
they have the consistency of a jar of ranch.
and really bad for Jars of Ranch, as he is just taking pot shots at Ranch. But all of this is to train because Michael is going to go off into the jungle on a one-man rescue mission to find Walt, and we are not going to see him again until it's just about too late. Michael is off screen for much of the rest of the season, and Jack is going to lead a group of people to find him. It's Locke, it's Sawyer. During their trek, we come to find out that Locke knows Sawyer's full name. Like, why do you use the name Sawyer? He seems to be really interested in why he uses the name Sawyer, because he knows that Sawyer's real name is James Ford, because he had seen the flight manifest and everything like that. So just an interesting thing, just a quick moment between the two of them.
But a name that you mentioned was not at least initially conducted into the hunting party, is Kate. But knowing Kate, she'll just show up, Missy and
Yes.
Baylor style. And so we get the most climactic point of this episode, which is an out-and-out standoff with the others. It's really interesting in that, like, the first third to half of season 2 is really focused around the tailies and everything to do with the hatch. The latter half is really going to be other focused for the first time since season 1, as we get here the return appearance of Mr. Friendly, Big Beardo himself. There's going to be an entire circle of others that will circle around our hunting party here. We have a very malevolent scene as tied up Kate is going to be shoved out, as Mr. Friendly is going to be holding her at gunpoint. He's going to show them how surrounded they are when he says, "Light them up!" And
Let him up.
circle of torches ends up ensconcing them. And Mr. Friendly makes a proposition. There's a line. That's my line.
Yeah.
We have our side. You have your side. As long as you don't cross the line,
We're
stay on
good.
your side, we're good. If you do, we're going to have problems.
Yeah, big issues. Obviously, Locke has said, like, don't tell me what I can and can't do, but Jack really feels that hard as well.
Yes.
So to be continued on that. We also, did you mention we hear Alex bring him out? So we'll get back to that in more than 3 minutes from now, but we will get back to that for sure.
And also just a brief, not to do about a flashback. Jack has like an emotional affair.
Jack gets his ass dumped.
Yeah, with the daughter of a patient that he's dealing with, and he ends up coming clean to Sarah, who then reveals that she has actually been engaging in an actual affair, and that they are
I'm leaving you.
Yeah, and so we're going to be exploring that as well, because suffice it to say, Jack's not going to be particularly happy with the enigmatic qualities of this mysterious lover.
This is the final Jack flashback of season 2, if I'm remembering correctly.
You are correct, yeah.
And all I think Mike and I want to say about like his next flashback appearances are like, he doesn't take this well.
No, and which, I mean, you could assume from Jack. Again, he not only wants to fix things all the time, but he doesn't know how to let things go, and that is just a noxious combination, much like fire and water.
Does not take this well. And yes, speaking of noxious combinations and not being received well, fire plus water. And huge props to the great Jessica Sterling, who has produced some slides for the video version of this podcast, has used for the fire plus water image Drive Shaft in diapers, singing "You All Every Butties," the name of the diaper brand that they are promoting over the course of recording Down the Hatch, and specifically getting to fire plus water. It was revealed that Mike Bloom fears nothing more than an adult baby.
Okay, that's a wild mischaracterization of a sentence.
Is it?
First, it's not a fear in that it just makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah.
B,
you're telling me that if it was dark at night and a whole gaggle of adult babies came marching up to you, you wouldn't be as scared?
I mean, if a whole gaggle of anything marched up to you, would you not be scared?
Well, I'm scared of a lot of things. So this
well, that's the other thing. You said I only have one fear, which is like, thank you. That makes me sound a lot braver than I am. But if anything, Josh, it represents the quality of Fire Plus Water, which I will say we ranked as the worst episode of Lost.
The good news, folks, is if you've made it through season 2, then according to Mike and I, you have already made it through the worst episode of Lost, and this was it. Any episode that puts Charlie Pace in diapers and has him and his cohort singing "You All Every Butties" is a pretty bleak hour indeed. But really, what else does it accomplish? That Charlie is like further isolating himself because he becomes like, it becomes outed that he had all of the heroin-filled Virgin Marys. He has, like a whole stash of them, Drive stash. He gets his ass beat by John Locke. He and Locke used to be pretty tight. By the end of this, Locke has like really stepped into a caretaker position with Claire, and Charlie is super jealous of it. And so Locke kicks the crap out of Charlie after Charlie keeps trying to baptize Aaron in the point ocean,
where he has kind of like a fugue state and just kind of comes to one night in the middle of the ocean and is like holding this young baby, seemingly going to baptize him. But of course, understandably, everyone takes it to mean like, is this SOB about to drown the baby? And it gets to the point where, once Aaron is recovered, Locke beats the snot out of Charlie, and it really starts the downward spiral of Charlie into what we refer to as Darth Charlie, to the point where he even puts his hood up towards the end to signify the turn to the dark side.
So I think this would be an episode that if there are skippable episodes of Lost, I always skip this episode whenever I can. And I think like the only thing that I feel like I need to remember from Fire Plus Water particularly is that like Charlie is now really on the outs. He got his butt kicked by Locke, and that's basically what you need to know. Anything else that you think is super important about this one, or should I move along so you don't have to look at this image any further?
Well, let's balance out, I think, the downturn of one relationship with the upswing of another. I think this is really the first time we dial into the like cutesy Hurley and Libby content, where I think they are definitely going to start to get flirty with one another. And again, it's a very fun situation for someone like Hurley, who, as we talked about up until Numbers, was kind of relegated to the comic relief, and as we know from tropes, is not necessarily one to get involved in a serious relationship. And I remember in the moment, it was very fun to be like, oh, Hurley's found somebody.
Yeah.
That is so great. Unfortunately, does not end very well.
No, not particularly, but at least we've got some time before it gets there. The Long Con is the next episode of Lost after Fire Plus Water. And I guess like Fire Plus Water helps you to understand why Charlie would team up with Sawyer to punk the rest of 815. And
we have a character assassination is pretty virulent.
There's a few character assassinations, a couple of literal ones here in season 2 of Lost. But this is going to be an episode where like Sawyer has been just like trending up too hard. Like we're a long way from like the earliest days of Sawyer and him just being like what is Hurley called? Racist jackass. Like he's like, he went on the raft, he risked his life, he nearly died for 815, and he just like doesn't feel comfortable with the fact that that's his reputation. And also, you took my stuff. So Sawyer runs a con on the rest of 815 because the hatch, among other things, is not just filled with smoothies and washing machines, but also an AOL. It's also got tons of guns. So many guns.
Yep. And so Sun is going to be attempted to get kidnapped. And so they say, oh, it must be the others. I mean, we didn't talk about this, but at the end of the hunting party, as you said, Jack doesn't take that declaration lying down. He goes to Ana Lucia and says, like, we've got to make an army. And so this really helps fuel those flames of, okay, we really have to stock up at this point. And so Sawyer is going to get his revenge for all of his stash being divvied up in his absence to basically give him the keys to the kingdom in a way. And so by the end of this, it's going to be revealed that he conspired with Charlie, who ends up trying to kidnap Sun, to again engender this paranoia and hostility within our main group, so that Sawyer is going to end up being the one with the weaponry.
Yeah. So he gets all the guns, and people are mad at Sawyer again. So Sawyer stock plummeting, at least, a bit for now. We'll see if that trends upwards at all based on the end of the season. Absence makes the heart grow fonder. I don't know. We can get into all of that later.
But something to note from the flashback perspective. Yes. For all the callousness that Sawyer is doing on the island, he still does have a heart to a certain extent, and the heart wants what it wants. And in the flashback, what he wants is a young woman by the name of Cassidy,
played by the great Kim Dickens.
And it's the classic, con artist heist movie trope, right? Of like, you fall for the mark in a way. He is supposed to be, he was initially conning like these two jamokes at a gas station, and she chips in to help. And then the two of them end up kind of co-conspiring for a little bit. He tells her about the long con, this idea of like there's a short game and a long game where you can basically like plant your seed within someone, and eventually that will grow.
That was like an accidental full bloom, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think that was even on purpose.
That's a rarity. And and eventually you will be able to get one in over on him, right? At the end of it all. And we get a little bit of an odd question mark here, an appearance by Kevin Dunn, when it turns out like, oh, he was supposed to con her the entire time. She finds out, and it turns out that even though Sawyer does get the money from her, he still does have some feelings towards her, perhaps.
Does. So see how all of that develops, if it ever develops again. I think if I said see how that all develops and we didn't say like what we said about DJ Qualls, like this may continue in some capacity. Maybe see Kim Dickens on Lost again. Okay, the long con. One of them kicks us off into a very, very compelling portion of season 2 in which We get the return of Danielle Rousseau, albeit briefly, and the return of Danielle Rousseau's interest in Saeed. She trusts Saeed a lot back from his first flashback episode in Lost. So here is his next flashback episode. It's his first here in season 2, I believe only in season 2. And it is centering on human lie detector Saeed Jarrah being the guy that Rousseau goes to say, I found one of them.
Yep. So Rousseau, of course, has many traps set up around the island. And so she shows him a bug-eyed man in a net who goes by the name of Henry Gale, who has an entire, what will turn out to be cover story that he was riding, of all things, a hot air balloon with his wife that crash landed on the island. Things got morbid. He had to bury his wife, and he was found in the jungle by this manic woman who ends up shooting him through the shoulder with a crossbow.
Yeah.
And so he is going to get brought into the hatch to not only get treated, but become their makeshift prisoner for a good portion of the season.
Yeah, a big question that looms over season 2 is like, is he one of them or is he not? Because he says, I'm Henry Gale. I'm from Minnesota. I voted Tim Walz for governor. Please leave me alone. And like he says, like, I got here on a hot air balloon, but it turns out he is probably pretty full of hot air as the season goes along. But initially, you're not sure. And the show does something very interesting where it kind of like leaves you in a place here in one of them where they introduce this character, but they do not resolve this question here in one of them. They keep it wide open. What's up with this guy, Henry Gale? But Saeed doesn't trust him. And yes. Saeed very rarely, I think, is like tactically wrong. Like we'll see by the end of the season, he sniffs out Michael. Like he's got a very good nose for bullshit. He can smell it a mile away.
Once he sees the driver's license of the real Henry Gale, he's able to put 2 and 2 together. But yeah, he is initially brought in as he sits down with Henry Gale and says, hello, my name is Saeed Jarrah, and I am a torturer.
I am a torturer. Yeah.
As he does initially torture this man and is not able to get any information out of him. And it ties really nicely to the flashback, where we find out how Saeed Jarrah does become a torturer, how he procures that specific set of skills. And it will introduce not even an interesting character, Josh, but more like an interesting actor who plays maybe multiple characters. This is, I believe, Joe Inman, who serves as an American that really works alongside Saeed to teach him how to truly get the most out of somebody, of course, played by the great Clancy Brown, from Mr. Krabs to Lost and everything in between.
Yeah, so Clancy Brown shows up here. What Mike is referring to, because I don't want to confuse people too much, but like initially he was like labeled as Joe Inman. I think you're right, and then later on he's going to show up by the end of season 2, and his name is Kelvin Inman. Mm-hmm. And earlier in the season, when Desmond is like he's basically like, that's the spot where that's like I think the Brzezinski spot comes later.
Yeah.
But like, I was here with my buddy Kelvin, was my partner in crime. And so like, I think like after the fact, maybe they sort of retroactively decide that this is the same guy. But it is the same guy. And it's another great example of like connections in the past. What is it that Mr. Echo said a few episodes ago? Do not mistake coincidence for fate. You even see Kate's father in this episode. Yes. He is one of the military guys.
So just like Sam Austin.
Yeah. So there's just like all of these various ways in which all of these characters are further connecting. But by far and away, the biggest deal is the introduction of the incredible Emmy-winning actor, whether it's for this show or something else. He's an Emmy-winning actor, Michael Emerson as Henry Gale. And I think just kicks us off into a really dynamic part of Lost season 2 that they stretch out, across a few things. So for example, this very next episode is maternity leave, where we get into what happened to Claire during the time that Claire was missing. And like, it's got one of the very worst sounds in all of Lost,
because they don't use the flashback timpanis that like really softly bring us in between the past and the present. Instead, I guess, much like to represent Claire's jarring, jagged memory coming back in shards, we get these blaring klaxons that just absolute scared the snot out of me. That's my one fear, not the men dressed as babies. It's this freaking sound. As we finally get this question answered. I mean, Claire, as we're starting to discover, the writers don't know what to do with her after she has given birth. She has this nascent relationship with Charlie, but even that's on the rocks, following everything with fire plus water. So they're like,
She's
yeah,
not really got much to do.
yeah, so like, hey, remember when Claire got kidnapped? And so it is going to be this group of her and Danielle Rousseau is going to partner up with her as well with Kate, as they are going to go into the jungle, finally figure out through, again, Claire's slowly accumulating memories, where she came from, where did she go? Cotton Eye Joe, there was plenty
Uh-huh.
of cotton because she was taken to yet another hatch called the Staff, which is a medical facility.
A medical facility, and it seems like pretty empty, abandoned, much
Hmm.
like a previous episode title. But in her flashbacks, there was like a nursery. There was, like Ethan comes back in the form of these flashbacks, and like she's being treated rather well by these people, though she's like clearly heavily sedated and being talked to like a child. And as she's like starting to like gather some of those memories back, which I think helps explain some of the memory loss, is all of the heavy sedation. She recalls this memory of a beardless man who is absolutely the same actor, and
Yes.
I think we can fairly say the same character
I
as
mean, considering that the season ends with him ripping off the fake beard, yes.
a certain bearded man. This guy who has been called, I think Sawyer calls him Zeke. He's also
Beardo.
he's also called Mr. Friendly, is sort of the more common name for this character. And then later on, at least, if not in this episode, he will be called Tom. So Tom Friendly, played by the great MC Gainey, the man who kidnapped Walt, apparently is either wearing a fake beard, Mike, which is implied by the theatrical glue that's discovered
Mhm.
here in the staff station, or he is like the fastest beard grower in all the land.
Well,
Considering the timeline between like these flashbacks and when he would have appeared at the raft, like that'd be a really quick uh, beard growth going
I mean,
on there.
speaking of beard growth, isn't this the episode where like Echo does that really weird thing where he like goes up to Henry Gale and he's like, "I killed two others the first night," and then he cuts off
Oh
his
yeah,
little goatee.
he cuts off his two little like kill nubs.
Yeah.
He cuts off his kill nubs and says like, I just needed to confess this to somebody. Yeah, so now we know what happened to Claire.
Oh, and also it should be mentioned that the reason why they go into the staff is because Aaron's also having a fever, and so they're worried like, okay, should we get medical supplies from this station? And it turns out that the fever was gone anyway. So
But
like,
we have heard of like an illness, right? Like
hmm
that
that's
has,
what that was Daniel Rousseau's story.
so let's just put like what's up with the illness on the board, because I think that's not the last time or the first time that we're hearing like someone got sick. So let's see if we ever get any further clarity on that.
Ah,
Clarity, yes. The whole truth, the whole tooth, Mike. This is a Jin and Sun episode that's going to end with an incredible moment where Henry Gale is eating cereal and explaining exactly how he would like kill Saeed and Ana
Sia
Lucia
and
and
Charlie.
Charlie in order for him to be safely, like how he would like trap them and like exchange them for him if he was in charge of the others, if he was a part
If
of
I
that.
did it.
If I like, this is very much his it's not OJ, it's Milk. His If I Did It memoir here.
Yeah, because
Uh,
because basically what happens is they decide, okay, if you're telling the truth, draw us a path to your hot air balloon. And
right.
so we're going to have a landing party in the form of Saeed and Lucia and Charlie going to scout it out. And so Henry Gale, who has been like slowly needling and also expanding the gulf between John Locke and Jack, who are growing more and more frustrated with each other's leadership styles. I know that Henry Gale is going to end the previous episode by being like, oh, sounds like the two of you had a fight. And Locke's like, we're not fighting, but he's going to secretly smash a plate behind the scenes in anger. And so, yeah, he's going to stoke the flames further. He can't leave well enough alone that right now he's being regarded as a degular person from Minnesota. But he sits there and like cautiously talks out a plan of, well, if I were another, I would have an entire group there just ready to besiege them and take them all down. But of course, I'm not one of them. You guys got any milk?
Great line. Great line. Very, very good ending. One of the best endings of all of Lost, I think.
But that is also to say, probably the biggest takeaway from this episode, which, like, is nice if you're a fan of the Quans like I am, but focuses
Mike, I always say, and we said this the last time when we got to the whole truth, when we did it in the spoiler-filled rewatch of Lost, I said, I always get to the whole truth, or I think about the whole truth, and I couldn't tell you at all. In my mind, I have no memory of what happens in the Jin and Sun flashback. And I was like, maybe that'll change now that we're talking about it in a deep... I once again come to you with no memory of the Jin and Sun flashback storyline and the whole truth. This is just like, there's no accommodation in my brain space to ever remember what happens in the Jin and Sun flashback of this episode.
Let me bring back your memory. There we go. Sun's knocked up. She's pregnant.
Oh, yeah, right.
This is when it's revealed she took a pregnancy test, and it turns out that Sun is pregnant. The big twist is that we find out through flashback that Jin and Sun struggle to conceive. That's one of the many rifts between their relationship, and a doctor confirms to Sun privately that it's because Jin is infertile. And so now the big question that comes out of this episode is, okay, is Jin the father? Is this sort of a miracle cure in the way that John Locke's legs were? Or was Sun carrying on an affair prior to coming to the island?
Right. So how is Jin the daddy? Is a question that I'm throwing up onto the board. But congrats to the Quans. We love to hear.
Jin is thrilled because, again, and he didn't know that he was the problem. He had assumed, I think the doctor had told him that it was actually Sun who was the one that had issues. So he's none the wiser. He's just elated at the fact that he gets to now make King Daddy Quan King Granddaddy Quan. But Sun is the one that is much more bereft with, as is usual with Sun over Jin, a lot more information than him.
Okay, so Jin and Sun are expecting, and I am expecting that this episode that we're talking about next, Lockdown, was a doozy for anybody who's really into Lost and watching it for the first time, certainly in the real time, because you get the blast door map. You get to see it's a team up episode between Locke and Henry Gale, as Locke is going to need some help from somebody
because a blast door comes down on his freaking leg.
Yes, which is horrible and is going to, make him, the island is taking things away from Locke. It's taking away his faith, and now
does it make great episodes?
It's challenging his ability to walk now. So really, really brutal stuff. But Lockdown, while Locke and Henry Gale are teaming up to try and get to the computer and punch in the numbers so the world doesn't explode, Locke's going to have a moment where the blast door comes down, the lights go into black light mode. He sees all sorts of white splotches in various different places around.
That's been a lonely several days for Desmond Hume.
Around the Swan.
Turn of the screw in a minute. I'm going to turn my screw.
And so he then sees on the blast door what appears to be several different Dharma stations. It appears to be circling a question mark. Is this the island? What is this? It's so deeply annotated in my household watching Lost for the first time. No image before or after, I think. No single one image was just dissected with so much scrutiny.
Because that's the thing, is that the orientation video fed us a lot of knowledge, but through, again, a lot of expository dialogue. This is a visual without explanation. There's so much symbology on it as well. There's so much stuff that's written alongside. It turns out, as we find out later, that Inman is working a little bit on it in one of the flashbacks right inside the hatch. He's painting it with bleach as they manually trigger the blast doors to go down. What does it mean? What does this indicate? What are there other Dharma stations besides the 3 that we've seen? What is this question mark in the middle? There is so much freaking stuff happening. And then on top of that, you get an answer to, correspond with all these many, many questions where Charlie, Ana Lucia, Saeed, they follow Henry Gale's map, and there's a hot air balloon. Okay, his story is verified. He is the real McCoy. He is Henry Gale. Except Saeed just does a little bit of digging and finds the actual
But still,
Henry
I did
Gale.
not believe you.
And so
I dug up that grave.
Yeah, and so despite the fact that Henry Gale could have just let Locke go, could have just gone AWOL and left him behind, he does help Locke. And so therefore, there's a little bit of a sense amongst the audience of okay, I guess he is just a good guy that's trying to, work alongside this to save the world. But then Saeed comes bustling in, holds him up against the wall. shows off the driver's license of a man named Henry Gale, who very much does not look like Michael Emerson. And Michael Emerson lets out the biggest smile to all but effectively say, "You got me."
Well, it's just like this very creepy look that he's looking at Saeed, and then he just like sort of straightens up. It's like, yeah, okay, I'm one of them,
Yeah.
for sure. So that question is now solved, and we move into this next stage, where now we are dealing with we have a prisoner in the basement that we like feel pretty good about having as a prisoner now.
Yeah. And also, unfortunately, the relationship between Locke and Helen is pretty much like to and out.
Yeah.
As we saw their buildup, and now we have their denouement. As it turns out that once again, it turns out that Anthony Cooper has appeared in Locke's life.
Tony Coops fakes his own death,
He
right?
fakes his own death,
he fakes his own death.
and so the woman who Anthony Cooper married, her son comes to him being like, "Hey,"
Wearing suits.
yeah, being like, "Hey, I don't think this is passing the smell test. Can you go check out and see what's happening?" And yeah, it turns out indeed that Anthony Cooper did fake his death, and he basically says like, "If you go along with it and say that I died and I get this, then I can get this money, and then I'm out of your life, and then we can finally move on with it all." But Locke can never truly move on, and his obsession with Anthony Cooper and the fact that he keeps it a secret from Helen leads to this, again, climactic sequence, as it always does, with this beautiful music that underscores where basically Locke is going to show up to this hotel after meeting with Anthony Cooper, walks out to find Helen, who followed him there, and basically says, "It's over. I can't marry you."
Yeah, he's trying to propose her, and she's like, nah. So they break up. That is sad. Tony Coops just kind of like looks on. He's like, well, you got me the money, and then he dips out. So Locke left by not just like his father now, but also left by Helen. So just,
I should clarify, not spoil too much. The son showing up is actually in a future episode.
Yes,
Suffice to say, Anthony Cooper will return. This is just he was reading the newspaper and saw an obituary for Anthony Cooper.
Correct. Yeah, we will see. This is not the last that we will see of Anthony Cooper. There will be more with him at a later date. But that is it for him here in season 2 for sure. Okay, so we go to Dave. We follow up Lockdown with like I think like in some ways like this episode actually works rather well with like the conversation we were having about Kate and the horse, right? Of like why are we seeing things from our off-island life here on the island? Except in the case of Kate and the horse, we have Sawyer able to verify with his own eyes that the horse is there. And in the case of Dave, Hurley has what appears to be an imaginary friend that no one else can see, and he is played by Evan Handler. He is played by Harry Goldenblatt himself, Evan Handler.
Yeah, so we finally take a deep dive into a part of Hurley's past that was explored briefly in Numbers, but not really, which is that Hurley was previously in a mental institution, the Santa Rosa facility. And so that was due in part to the fact that apparently there was this like big tragedy that was triggered by Hurley, getting on this balcony that only supported a specific amount of people. Several died in the process. And so Hurley kind of checked himself in. That's where he ends up, getting into contact with Dave, who we are led to believe for a good portion of time is a real person. And this is Hurley's number 2, a fellow brigand, this guy who maybe fostered the word dude into Hurley's lexicon. And then it eventually turns out, once Hurley meets with a psychologist, that he cracks his world wide open by revealing that Dave's not here,
He's
man.
not real. He's not real.
He's not real. And so, yet again, some of you heard this before, Josh, when Hurley sees him on the island, he is quite disheveled from it.
Because there's been another food supply. So like there's a pallet that has dropped with supplies and with food on it. And so let's add this to the list is what's up with supply drops. We got supply drops on the board. This is interesting. And like it triggers a lot in Hurley with the eating issues earlier in the season. I believe it's on the other side of the long con that Sawyer and Hurley go around searching for a frog, and Sawyer makes Hurley go with him because otherwise he will expose that Hurley has a secret stash of food that he's been hoarding, which I think is very regressive and stupid.
Yeah.
So he's still dealing with a lot of these issues, and it's triggered. And here's Dave, and like Is Dave real? Is Dave not? Like we have seen, like the island have like moments where like ghosts from the past seem to be here. Ghosts from the present with Walt maybe here as well. What about ghosts from the mind? And so like, is Dave real or not? I think like it feels fairly open and shut by the end of the episode
Yeah, well,
that Dave is not real.
well, I think Hurley, it's not even that Dave is not real. Dave tries to convince Hurley that the island is not real.
Right.
He tries to convince Hurley, like, listen, man, you made me up. Who's to say that you didn't make up this entire fiction? The entirety of Lost could have been written by you while you're playing Connect Four with Leonard in Santa Rosa. And I think this was also a fun sort of attempt for Lost to kind of lampshade one of its biggest theories from the first season, which
It's
is like,
purgatory, man. It's not real.
or even like the saying elsewhere, like, oh, it takes place in the mind of one particular person who's just imagining this up the entire time. To the point where Dave nearly talks Hurley off a cliff. He's like, listen, if it's not real, then you can just die right now. And the one person to stop him is Libby, who gives this like impassioned plea to him about her feelings towards
Kisses
him.
him. It's cute. They share
Very
a kiss. And then we see in a flashback that she was also in the mental institution. Oh my God, what's going on with Libby? Oh my God, we gotta wonder what's up with Libby now. What's up with Libby? What's up with Libby? Question on the board.
Yeah,
What's up with Libby?
which will unfortunately be
Clearly, like this is going to be a hard answer to accomplish, considering Libby's fate in just a couple of episodes.
But even her showing up at the finale, where she's like, "Here, Desmond, have a boat."
Can I just take a quick second and like
Please.
address Dave's theory to Hurley? Like, what if none of this is real? What if all of this is just in your head? Just jump off the cliff. Consider this a spoiler if you wish.
Mm-hmm.
But everything that's happening on the show is like happening in like the mythology of the show. Like, like what is the island? What is the scope of the show? I do think like it's going to do you a disservice to not dispel this now that like within the world of Lost, this stuff is happening. Within the world of Lost, what you're seeing, everything you've seen up to this point has happened in the show. Like people are seeing weird ghosts or whatever they are.
Whatever happened.
You know, so like this will be explored and maybe even stress tested at certain points along the way of the show. But I do think like I have like a solemn duty to say like the show is happening. Like be invested in the characters. It's worth being invested in the characters. They're not just like in some sort of like strange like dreamscape. They're actually, I mean, they're not real because they're TV characters, but within the TV show, they are real. So that is all I will say about that. SOS. It's a cute episode. Not much to really say here other than like, oh, it's a cute episode. It's Rose and Bernard and how they met, and they met so recently. They're so cute.
Yeah, they were quite late lovers. I guess December. I think it was like February when they ended up meeting together when Rose's car gets stuck in the snow. And
they
Bernard
just got married like right before the show. They're in Sydney for their honeymoon. Like they're so cute, but they're also in Sydney for another reason.
Yes, so it turns out that as this picture depicts, actually, Rose is going to tell Bernard that she has been diagnosed with cancer.
Yeah.
And so Bernard, who is going to, I think, embody a bit of like Jack feistiness in him, both on and off island here, insists, no, I'm going to find a way to fix this. I'm going to find a way to cure you. I can't lose you anytime soon. And so that is what is going to take them to Australia, where they go see Isaac of Uluru, who is a faith healer, who turns out he's like, listen, this is a big scam. But she goes to him, she goes to Bernard and says like, nope, I'm going to proceed forward from here and we're just going to live our happy,
blissful life. Does he say it's a scam, or does he say to her basically like there are, pockets of energy around the world of healing energy, but this place can't do it for you? Maybe there's another place out there, I think is what he says.
And that place happens to be the island. As on the island, Bernard says, wait a minute, I missed out on season 1 of Lost. Let me take a storyline from there. We should build a big SOS signal to attract attention so people can come rescue us. And he's able to like initially recruit people, but then they eventually kind of, swagger away because they're like, no, there's much bigger fish to fry. And then Rose is going to admit to Bernard that her cancer, from her perspective, has been cured.
She feels that it's gone. She feels that it's been cured. She has additional reason to think that this place can heal people because Rose has a moment in her flashback where she sees John Locke at the airport in Sydney in his wheelchair. And so she has a moment with him on the beach of like basically saying like, I know you were paralyzed
Yeah,
before you were here.
I believe she's the only alive character to know, because I do believe Locke told Boone at one point,
Yes,
who's
he
now
did.
deceased.
He did. So Rose knows about Locke being able to walk, and she also feels that she is no longer sick with cancer. So I think it's continuing this question of like, now it's not just like why can Locke walk all of the sudden, but between that and potentially, depending on what's going on with Jin, like it seems like maybe Jin is able to father a child potentially, like, and now we're hearing that like Rose isn't sick with cancer anymore. Why does this island have this like supernatural ability to heal? Is I think something worth wondering about
Yeah.
on the show.
So a couple of things to take out of this episode. So we didn't mention it last time, but the aftermath of what do we do with this guy, Henry Gale? The answer is let him continue to live rent-free in John Locke's head, where he's
Yes,
just going to drop this nugget of, oh, by the way, remember when you told me to push the button and I said I did?
I didn't push the button.
I lied.
Didn't do it.
Turns out that the button was actually a scam the entire time, a scam and a sham. And that's something that, even though Locke's like, no, you're a liar, you're lying to me, it's something that clearly is going to rile him up. Speaking of getting riled up, in a manner of speaking, Jack and Kate are going to be heading through the jungle in this episode, and they're going to get caught in one of Russo's traps together.
Caught in
And
the net.
caught in a net, and it's that forced proximity that will engender yet another very charged moment between the two of them. But someone will come charging out of the jungle towards them to end the episode, as they are met with the unconscious body of one Michael Dawson.
Michael Dawson back in the mix, and oh boy, oh no, he's back. He's back just in time for one last Ana Lucia flashback episode. And we are going to see like the very sudden tragic ends of two of the main tailies. And we don't have a lot of main tailies. So the tailies get halved here in Two for the Road, as both Ana Lucia and Libby are going to get caught in the crossfires, not caught in a net, though Ana Lucia gets caught in a net with Sawyer.
Yeah, though it's a purposeful catching of a net to get the guns.
At a certain point in this episode. And like the timing of it is incredibly shocking for a number of reasons, not the least of which is like we just learned that Libby was in the institution with Hurley, and we have no clarity on that. Ana Lucia and Jack, we didn't talk about this because it gets cut so prematurely. Jack says, how long would it take to train an army? And he and Ana Lucia are potentially going to work together to turn the 815ers into an army that can deal with Mr. Friendly and the others.
Plus, there's also a little bit of like, not, I would say, outright will they, won't they with them, but like there certainly was a talk about a love quadrangle at the time between Jack and Sawyer and Kate and Ana Lucia.
And so like, if it feels sudden, there's a few reasons for that. One of which is like, it's like, a very effective plot maneuver to advance us into the final stage of season 2. Another is reportedly the reason why they are not on the show after this is that Michelle Rodriguez and Cynthia Watros, who play Ana Lucia and Libby, had an incident of their own in Hawaii. That there was a DWI incident between the two of them, and it was speculated for a very long time that they got fired, and so they had to get shot here on the show. It has since been talked about that that Ana Lucia, that Michelle Rodriguez was just here for a single season anyway. The truth probably lies somewhere in between. Like this was a business decision and a creative call. Regardless, it's Michael shooting these two women is among the most shocking moments of all of Lost, and certainly up to this point is just like you'll never forget seeing this for the first time if you were unspoiled. This was crazy.
Absolutely wild. So let's talk through what happens here. So yeah, Michael has returned, and Ana Lucia finally encounters Henry Gale, a representation of this group of others that have kidnapped and caused her so much misery for those initial 48 days. And so essentially her storyline this episode is that like she's going to get access to a gun so she can go kill him, especially when he attacks her in the armory. but she decides not to go through with it. She eventually relents, and as she just kind of is like stewing in her feelings, sitting on the couch, she gives this gun to Michael as he's like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go shoot him. And then he looks at the gun and says, I'm sorry. And she replies,
Sorry for what?
for what? And he turns to her and shoots her twice in the chest. And immediately she slumps over. The more tragic side, arguably, I would say, is that Michael then hears a voice behind him.
Michael?
And it turns out to be Libby, because a B plot throughout this episode is that Libby and Hurley, now that they've like officially confirmed their coupledom, decide to go on a picnic together. And apparently when you go on picnics together on Lost, Josh, death is abound.
Oh, yeah, because didn't Shannon go on a picnic with Saeed? And then,
also, and then Boone died, and then she died.
Yeah.
And so as Libby goes down to the hatch to get some blankets, which will prolong her death until the next episode, Michael, in just like abject shock, just starts firing and shoots her in the stomach. And Michael is so taken aback, but he steals his gaze. He proceeds forward. He has a job to do, as we'll talk about in a few episodes from now. He proceeds into the armory, raises a gun, and just when we think he's about to kill Henry Gale, shoots himself. Which we find out later on was a ruse to make it believe like Henry Gale had gotten the jump on him and freed himself, when really Michael held up his end of the bargain and
doesn't
freed
pass
Henry Gale.
Saeed's smell test,
Yes.
as we'll get to. But the whole sequence of events is like very harrowing, and just like really kicks things into such overdrive. Leaving this episode, you're like, what has happened to Michael? Why would he do something like this? And feeling like, especially with Libby, I think like hard to believe that she's actually dead. But as we'll come to see very quickly, like, yeah, she's not gonna make it. And so it's a vicious episode. I think a couple of other things, if it hasn't happened already, then it will have happened in this episode, that there's going to be a moment between Locke and Henry Gale where Henry says why do you think that I was coming here? I was coming for you.
I mean, it's got to be this episode, considering that this is the last time.
If it hadn't happened previously, so there's a moment where Henry Gale is going to tell Locke like the reason they found him in the first place, why he was in the jungle and why he got trapped by Rousseau, is because he was coming for Locke. He wanted to find Locke. So I think that this adds a question to our board of like, what is so special about Locke that the others want him as well? So that's thing one. Thing two is, in the flashback, another instance of like crossed paths is that Anna goes to Sydney because she gets hired by, she Wandoff's Christian Shepherd.
She works in TSA because she had gotten let go from the police force after her mother, who was like the police commissioner, found out that she had basically lied that she didn't know who Jason McCormick was, so she could kill him herself.
Correct.
In cold blood.
And so she is going to be, chaperoning Christian. She's private security for Christian and doesn't have a lot to do until one drunken night. He says it's finally time to go in Sydney, and they go in the rain to like someone's house where it appears that Christian is shouting at a woman. Yep. And what do we catch from that dialogue?
I believe he says, I want to see my daughter.
Which would be very, very provocative, right? Like, if Christian has a daughter, are we, the audience, just being like held back from the fact that like Jack has a sister? Is this something that's just been withheld from us? Is it something that like Jack knows, but the audience doesn't? Or is this as much a secret to Jack as it would be to the audience? But suddenly the notion that Christian is in Australia, potentially searching for his daughter, opens up a question with potentially, a wide-ranging amount of answers, because I imagine that there are a lot of people who live in Sydney, Australia. But when it comes to like Australian women that we know on the show, there's really only two. So just, I don't know. I have no idea. I've got no idea.
We'll see. We'll see. There. But yeah, Ana Lucia ends that flashback, tearfully calling her mom, apologizing for everything that happened. And her mom says, just come home. And unfortunately,
she never does.
And that's the thing. At the time, this was actually a rather cathartic moment for Lost fans. Ana Lucia was not a well-liked character whatsoever. They thought that She was too belligerent. She was too negative. Even though Shannon was not very well received, she did kill Shannon.
Yep.
People thought she was disrupting the whole Jack, Sawyer, Kate stuff. But I do think, Josh, especially when we were re-litigating her character on Down the Hatch,
liked Anna.
yeah, we thought she was a very tragic character given her circumstances.
Yes, for sure. So R.I.P. Anna Lucia and soon to be R.I.P. Libby? Question mark?
Yeah.
As we get into the next episode, the second of the two Mr. Echo flashback episodes here in season 2, question mark, is going to put Mr. Echo on the path towards, all right, so he was like a warlord, he was a priest, and now he is a computer button pusher. Is
the natural path, right? You work your way up the corporate ladder to get to that point.
The career arc. On the other side of Ana Lucia's death, Echo is experiencing visions that are calling him toward a question mark. Ana Lucia herself is appearing in some of these visions with Mr. Echo. His brother, his late brother Yemi, is appearing in some of these visions. Some of these visions aren't even Echo's visions. Some of these visions, one of these visions is John Locke having a vision that he is Echo and he is looking for his brother. Echo and Locke are going to be set off on this path to find the question mark that was at the heart of the blast door map. And where it will lead them, of course, is back to the Beechcraft that is so tied to Echo's, reason for being here in the first place. His brother somehow being here. This is, a huge moment of like, don't mistake coincidence for fate for Echo. And they are going to find that from the view on top, if you look down, there is what appears to be a question mark grown into the grass on the ground. And beneath there is yet another Dharma station called the Pearl.
The Pearl, which is for observational studies. As it turns out that, you thought there was like a lot of bookish, studious shit in the Swan. Oh boy, this is a full-ass library where, once again, it is a two-man job, but it's not pushing buttons. It is looking at the other hatches via security footage. And there's even
stating, like, stressing pretty hard, like, this is all science experiments.
Yeah, like, oh, you put your writings in a journal and you send them up a pneumatic tube back to HQ.
I missed it the last two podcasts. Sorry, guys. Streak
That's
broken.
fine. We had it a bit where we would say pneumatic tubes every podcast on and down the hatch, but the streak is back again. And so this is going to drive John Locke to do some very un-John Lockean things. This is his biggest crisis of faith he's had yet, where he realizes what's been presented to him in this moment is that all of that was false, that he is pushing buttons for no reason. It was just part of a larger science experiment that the Dharma Initiative had set up years and years ago.
Yeah, but this makes Echo believe that the work that's being done in the hatch is more important than anything. And he tells Locke, if you will not push the button, I will. And so this is the real ships in the night moment for the two of them, where Echo's faith is only strengthened and Locke's is like shattered at this point. He no longer believes in the button or the purpose. He thinks this whole thing is a freaking joke. Libby dies also in this episode as they like try to use the heroin. Like they use this as the moment for like, Sawyer, take us to the stash because you've got the heroin, you've got the guns from the heroin from the Virgin Mary statues, and like Sawyer like can only pretend to be a total shitbag for so long. When he finds out the stakes, like obviously he is going to help out. He is also like distraught over what's happened to Ana Lucia because, as Mike alluded to, he and Ana Lucia had previously on Lost. They boned, they had sex. So this whole thing, I screwed her.
Yeah, and so Libby's final word as she is laying dying is Michael, as if to indicate like, oh, Michael shot me, you shouldn't trust him. But unfortunately, she never gets there. As they're just saying like, yeah, Michael's here. What about it?
They mistake it as like, he's okay, Michael's fine. So, oh my gosh, really, really rough. 3 minutes is the revelation of what Michael's life has been like for the last couple of weeks. And what it has been like is he leaves the hatch. He goes on the run searching for Walt. He immediately gets caught by the others. He is going to be just off screen during the events of the hunting party. He meets a young woman named Alex, who we have previously met in maternity leave,
Mm-hmm.
who, if we recall, Danielle Rousseau has a child whose name was Alex. So
Very popular name at the time.
popular name at the time. Michael will be brought to this beachside area where tons of others are located, and he will be held captive for days. Where he is ultimately going to be briefly reunited with his son, Walt. He has
Mm-hmm.
3 minutes, and they don't even use the full 3 minutes. They yank him before it's too late. They're doing tests on Walt, is what Walt tells his father. And then this woman, Miss Clue, is going to tell Michael that we will allow you to reunite with your son, but you need to go and get these 4 people, and you also need to retrieve the man in the hatch. And
Yep.
the 4 people are Jack, Kate, Hurley, and
Who
who's
the
James
hell's
Ford?
Ford?
You know him as Sawyer. Michael is willing to do whatever is necessary in order to secure this deal because, on top of everything else, they're going to get the boat. Michael throws that in. I want the boat that took Walt, it should be noted.
So, on the island, Michael is now trying. We know what his end goal is, right? That this is like trying to get someone to say a phrase in password. He has to get these 4 people over to the other
It's
side
a
of the.
complicated task.
It's a complicated task because initially, of course, he's trying to rile up like he shot Ana Lucia and Libby and ran away. We gotta go take down these others. But as you mentioned, Saeed has sniffed out the entire facade. And so we are going to see that like this will get more so sniffed out down the line when like Michael actually admits it while they're in the middle of the jungle, like, all right, yeah, sorry, you got me. This is what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
But at least at the moment, he has successfully convinced, the right people to the point where he even says like, "Oh no, not Saeed, not Saeed. No, I know that Saeed's by far the most capable for this
They're not
mission."
they're he can only bring these people. Like, he's not allowed to bring anybody else. And so, like, when Saeed's like, I'm coming to like the other side of the island, I'm going to help you take them out, and Michael's like, no way. Everyone is like baffled by this, and Saeed just like plays it off very casually. But Saeed, again, human lie detector, instantly is like, okay, so you're the mole.
Yep. But there is obviously a different event to attend to, yet another funeral, as we have a double one between Ana Lucia and Libby. And that's Hurley was like the final one to get over the finish line because obviously he is very much understandably wallowing in grief. And so eventually at the funeral, he tells Michael, I'm coming with you. And so we truly, like any penultimate episode, set up the finale as okay, Michael got the people that he wants to. The question is, what do the others want with these 4 people?
Yeah. And we also have a couple of other setups because Saeed is going to sketch out the plan that while they go through the jungle alongside Michael, Saeed is going to, we get this really in the finale, which let's just get into it. Live
Yeah.
Together, Die Alone is the 2-part finale that by the end of 3 minutes, Desmond David Hume has returned. He has
Boat.
he has a sailboat. There's a boat off in the horizon, and Saeed, Jack, and Sawyer swim out to it, and Desmond is just wasted in the bowels of the ship, just getting super super drunk and shooting at them, and then just like now like okay, he's been sailing around, he wasn't able to get away, the world didn't end, and so Desmond now is just like on our beach. We've just adopted Desmond, I guess, to the point that this finale is a Desmond episode. It's Desmond's turn to get a flashback. And that's a really big deal to give the finale's perspective over to a guest star, to a guy who we've barely seen, but it ends up being rather important as the storylines diverge into like 3 really big storylines. Storyline A is the journey towards the others to for Michael's plan to go off, which, spoiler alert, it basically, it kind of works. Michael is able to get, as if you're watching the YouTube version, Hurley, Jack, Kate, and Sawyer all get taken over to the others. They
Despite
know,
the fact that, again, they know that he was lying to them the entire time. They're like, you know what? No, we're going to cross the line. We're going to meet those others.
but they think that they've got this, ace up their sleeve, which is Saeed alongside Jin and Sun are taking Desmond's boat to the other side.
AKA Libby's boat.
Libby, which we find out is Libby's boat that she gives to Desmond so he can sail around the world. So
to get his honor back.
Another lost connection. And like the only thing that really happens that is sort of successful from Saeed's mission is that the audience gets something new to ponder, which is this statue of a foot. Quentin Tarantino loves this episode as well. A foot with 4 toes. Why does that statue only have 4 toes? Let's put 4-toed statue ? On our list. But when they go to the place that is allegedly the site of the others that they're trying to reach, there's nothing there. There's even like this huge Dharma door that literally leads to just like an alcove.
It's all a stage. It was all set dressing to make Michael believe that they were this dilapidated group of, jungle people.
They eat fish, and so there's nothing there. So Jack and Saeed's plan gets shot to sunshine because they don't have a backup Saeed anymore. Jack and Kate and Sawyer are the only ones that they want.
Yeah, Hurley gets let go expressly to communicate what happened back because obviously Michael is not going to go back. And Michael's going to turn to Henry Gale, who has now donned his finest other attire. He's got like
he's
a nice
back. We see him now after he had been released by Michael, and it certainly seems like he's in charge.
Right, as Michael is going to ask, "Who are you people?" And Henry Gale replies, "We're the good guys, Michael."
We're the good guys, Michael. Are they? Putting that down, are they? Are they the good guys? Is a question that I've got about the others. And so that's the setup. Michael and Walt are reunited. They are allowed to leave. As far as we know, as we leave season 2 of Lost, Michael and Walt have also left season 2 of Lost.
And we should also mention that Walt is incredibly missing from season 2. He shows up in
those ghost sequences. That's really it.
Yeah,
basically.
The Shannon quote unquote dreams, the reunion with Michael. And I think a lot of people apportion it to the fact that Malcolm David Kelly, this comes sometimes with being a child actor and the fact that this is supposed to be a relatively truncated timeline in Lost, right? Only about like a month and a change have passed.
He grew up real fast, the actor.
Yeah, he shot up. Puberty can be a son of a bitch. And I think as a result, the producers' hands were kind of tied. They couldn't Bobby Draper him. And so they're like, yeah, we're going to keep Walt largely off screen for the season.
Right. So we find out that you can leave the island, but at what cost is sort of the ultimate, point from Michael's storyline here in season 2. So whether or not we ever see them again, to be determined, but it certainly seems like they got away. They got away with it at a horrible cost. But then there's the third storyline, which is perhaps the most compelling of all of them.
Yeah. Should we get to the D line, if you will, the Desmond storyline?
Yes.
Because I think it segues nicely into what's going on with the Hatch. Let's talk about the life of Desmond Hume and the fact that almost like Jin and Sun, there is a little bit of like a star-crossed lovers aspect where when we meet Desmond, he is estranged from a young woman by the name of Penelope Widmore, also known affectionately as Penny. Penny is the daughter of this irascible businessman by the name of Charles Widmore, who is basically saying like, I don't want you carrying on with my daughter.
Get in the car.
Yes, exactly. After he's released from a military prison, which is an interesting bit. We'll can certainly dote on that as to like, why was Desmond in the military? Why is he no longer in the military? And so Desmond is going to eventually go to the United States, which is where Penny is. This is where he is going to meet Libby, who fortuitously gives him a boat so he can sail around the world to prove himself to Charles Widmore. It's a race. And so Desmond is going to have like one final talk with Penny. We'll see that this occurs shortly, I think, after or before the events of Man of Science, Man of Faith.
Yeah.
And so he is going, the two of them are basically going to leave on some pretty bad terms where Desmond's basically like, listen, I love you. I love you, Penny, but I got to do this in order to like,
I have to get my honor back
to appeal myself.
And then he goes running.
Yeah,
and then
in the eyes of your stupid dad. So he sails around the world, gets into a shipwreck, winds up on the island in the arms of one Kelvin Inman, again played by Clancy Brown. He is then dragged into the hatch, where he is brought into everything that we know. He is now the second man on the button pushing operation. He spends 3 years down there with the belief of you can't go outside. The outside is irradiated, it's disease filled. You have to inject yourself with vaccines just to make sure you don't die from everything going on the island. And then one day, Desmond happens to make his way. He sees that Inman comes back wearing a hazmat suit that has a little bit of a tear in it. That piques on his curiosity. So he goes outside and finds that the entirety of the 3 years, Inman has actually been fixing up Desmond's boat to leave the island. In his anger, Desmond attacks and kills Inman, happening on a fortuitous day in September 2004. And because Desmond is not back in time, it took him more than 108 minutes to go out there and kill Inman and bury him. By the time he rushes back to the hatch to put in the numbers, it is too late. An electromagnetic charge has emitted from the island, crashing Oceanic 815 and leading to the events of the show.
Yeah, so we now have an explanation, potentially, for maybe not why are they all here on like a figurative, metaphorical level, but why are they all here literally? I think I crashed your plane. And by not pushing the button, a whole burst of energy is released. And we see like the hatch is like exploding, and then it stops. And that certainly seems to coincide with the collapse of Oceanic 815. So I don't think that that's an explanation people were like necessarily expecting from the season 2 finale, but there you go.
Yeah.
Pretty big moment. And all of that is playing alongside Locke teaming up with Desmond and saying like, I think the hatch is bullshit, and I would like your help in proving that it's not real.
Screw the button, man.
And this very kind-hearted gentleman named Mr. Echo is pushing the button, and I would like to force him out and then watch it count down to 0 and then prove to everybody that it's all a hoax. And so they trick Mr. Echo. Mr. Echo leaves, and he has to team up with Charlie now to like get into like Desmond and Locke. They know how to do the blast door situation, so they can't get back in. Clock runs down to 0, but Desmond is also going to have this moment where he realizes, wait a second, I crashed your plane. So that means this thing is absolutely real. And luckily there's a MacGuffin in the form of a failsafe key that if he goes underneath the hatch, he can turn the key. And it is like only break glass in case of emergency, only do this if the computer is totally toasted, which makes you wonder why he didn't do this earlier in the season, which is like maybe another instance like they don't know everything that they're doing as they're writing the show. But he turns it, and this is after like everything is going nuts. Mr. Echo and Locke have this moment where they're facing each other, and Locke realizes as the world is like spinning out of control, he goes, I was wrong.
And then that's the last we see of them because Charlie has teamed up with Echo. His character is maybe on the upswing by comparison. It's not saying much, but basically he has like found religion once again under someone like Echo, and so now the two of them are working together. Charlie also does toss all the Virgin Marys into the ocean, showing that like he's officially done with heroin, but then also gets like, for all the good work he does, he gets conked in the head by a big piece of metal. And so even though he emerges from the hatch relatively unscathed, it is a big question mark, not the Pearl, as to what happened to Locke, Echo, and Desmond by the end of this.
And there's the huge purple sky that like seems to be a big deal, causes a huge noise. We don't know what's up with the people in the Swan Station in the hatch. Also, like very oddly paced, that like the purple sky happens, and then once it's resolved, Henry Gale sends Michael on his merry way.
Yeah, he's like, anyway.
Yeah, that's kind of weird just in terms of like how they chunk out this information, but sends them on their merry way. And then we cut to this who knows where, some sort of Arctic place where two dudes are hanging around.
One of which is not Matthew Fox.
One of them looks like
Matthew Fox,
and a lot of people are like, is that Matthew Fox? It's not. And while they're not looking, there is some sort of anomaly that they detect, and they make a phone call to their benefactor and report the anomaly. And their benefactor appears to be someone that we know and isn't appearing to be is someone we know. It's Penny. It's Penelope Widmore, the woman of Desmond's dreams, seems to have the island, if not literally on her radar yet, certainly on her radar as she is trying to figure out where this thing is. So season 2 ends with like many of our characters scattered to the winds yet again. Some of them have been kidnapped yet again. And we also have like the hatch exploding yet again. But the big difference this time, where hope seemed all but lost for rescue, now we know on like a meta level that at least one person is looking for the island, someone from like outside the island. So that is a really big deal to introduce into Lost at this stage. And we close out season 2, and we are on the cusp of the 50% mark. The end of what I like to call book 1 of Lost is coming next with season 3.
Season 3 is a very interesting one. I think I would define it as almost like a tale of two cities in a way, where I think season 3 has some really great stuff in it. I will admit, without saying too much, the first half is going to resemble season 2 a little bit, particularly from a character perspective, where I think the creators are going to try to figure out how to explore new character beats with a lot of our tried and true people. And some of them work to great effort, and some of them less so. And then we'll talk about it. It's a very historical moment for Lost halfway through the season that informs the rest of the series to come in really every way, shape, or form. And I'm happy to relitigate it with you all, Josh, next week.
Very excited. Before we go, I want to go over the questions that we've written down, see what's been answered, and then reset the questions that we have on the board. So leaving season 1, our questions were, guys, where are we? We still don't know. What is the monster? We know it's smoke, but we don't know anything else.
Smoke that plays flashbacks from your memories in your head.
Why can Locke walk? We still don't know. Are there ghosts? We still don't know for sure. Who are Adam and Eve? Seemingly nothing on that front in season 2. What are the whispers? We hear them. They seem to be associated with the others, but beyond that, we don't really know. What's up with Aaron? Aside from needing a baptism, we still don't really know. Who are the others? We have some answers.
Yeah.
There's Tom. There's Miss Clue.
Henry Gale.
There's Henry Gale. What's down the hatch? We have an answer.
There we go.
That is resolved. What is special about Walt? All we know is that they bit off more than they can chew, is what they said about Walt. So that's not super satisfying as an answer. What's up with the numbers? We know that they're important still because they're being inputted into the computer, but we don't know why.
And Hurley does have a brief moment where he freaks out about the numbers being entered in the computer, but it's fairly minute.
What's up with the Beechcraft? We have an answer to that.
Yep.
It is related to Mr. Echo and Yemi, so we know what the deal is there. Who was on the radio in the Beechcraft? It was Bernard, so we have an answer there.
Doing his best Ian Somerhalder impression.
So that's great. How did the Black Rock get in the middle of the jungle? We do not know. Once again, what's with the monster? And with 3 question marks, we still don't know. Made of smoke. Why did they take Walt? Are the Rafties dead? The Rafties are not dead. We still don't totally know why they took Walt. Why is Michelle Rodriguez on Lost was a question that I had. Well, because she was a series regular for season 2.
Yep.
And no further than that. And then I asked what's down the hatch again, which again, we got the answer to. So we had a few answers from season 1, but still a ton from season 1 that are open. Heading into season 3, a few of the questions that we highlighted along the way here for season 2. Why are they all here? We know literally how they got here, but why are they here? I think is a question that we should be asking. What is the incident? What is up with Ghost Walt? What happened to Cindy plus the other tailies? What's up with all the lists? What's up with the horse is a question that I had on here. Why is the monster so interested in Mr. Echo and Locke? Why do the others wear fake beards is a question, I think. What's up with this illness that we keep hearing about? How is it possible that Jin could be the father of Sun's child, given that we know he is infertile? What's up with all the supply drops? What's up with Libby? Why do I wrote down, how does the island people? I think is an incomplete thought.
How does the island people?
I think what I wanted was, how does the island heal people?
Heal people. Okay, I can also say transport people, considering that Henry Gale does tell Michael, go this very specific bearing to get off the island.
Sure. What's up with Christian Shepherd, quote unquote, having a daughter? Maybe.
Mhm.
Why do the others want Locke? Because that's what Henry Gale says. I was coming for you. What the frick is the four-toed statue all about? It was such a weird thing that happens in the finale. Why is that? Are the others the good guys? Are they
Mhm.
really? Why was Desmond in military prison? We didn't talk about it, but there's a stain on the wall in the hatch that gets identified as a dude named Radzinski.
Radzinski,
So I
which
wrote
was
down, who is Radzinski?
yeah,
Is a
which it
question.
would seem to be either Inman's previous partner or like someone he knew.
Why do the others want Jack, Kate, and Sawyer specifically? What up with that purple sky? And then a very important question that I wrote down that we didn't talk about enough is, what's up with the Hurley bird? Because there's a
Yeah.
bird in the jungle as they're going around that swoops at everybody, and Michael tries to shoot at, but he doesn't have any ammo in the gun, which is how Michael's like, I'm in trouble. And it seems like the bird is shouting, Hurley!
And so, who knows? We talked about polar bears, which we haven't seen in a while. Could there be other random zoological sites on the show that are certainly ones to talk about? We shall see. We have a whole animal kingdom of theories to talk about, Josh.
You know, we didn't even put down in season 1 what's up with the polar bear as a question, but the Dharma Initiative answers that, right? Like, we have zoological experiments that we want to do. So it's like, okay, so the Dharma Initiative brought polar bears here.
Which seems a little inhumane, considering that polar bears probably don't like warm climates.
Just a touch. But I do think it's just really cool that, I think like Lost has a reputation of like asking too many questions, not delivering any answers. And I think that like internally within season 2 specifically, lots of questions get established and resolved within the space of season 2. I think the Dharma Initiative is like a really cool inroad to a lot of resolving a lot of different questions. So we've got a whole list of stuff still heading into season 3, though. How is this all going to resolve? We shall see next week when Lost for First Timers here on Down the Hatch continues. Make sure you're subscribed to all things RHAP. We know scripted TV. Just search RHAP. We know scripted TV on your podcast player of choice. You will find us there. Or if you want all the direct information, Rob has a website.com/scripted, including how you can find us on YouTube. Ratings and reviews, so appreciated here on RHAP. We know scripted TV. We're still early in our, not Hurley, in our existence here, and your ratings and reviews matter very much. So if you can take some time out of your day, 108 seconds or less, we would appreciate those ratings and reviews.
Push that button.
Also, to our Down the Hatch specific podcast feed, just search Down the Hatch Lost wherever you get your podcasts, and send in your feedback. Down the Hatch, rhap@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. By the time we get to season 3, we can actually read some of that feedback. We will no longer be banking episodes at that point, so that will be very exciting. Looking forward to hearing if you guys are enjoying this. I'm sure some nits to pick, but hopefully you're having a fun time if you are a former Lost fan, somebody who's seen the whole show, and hopefully this is providing a service to those of you who are either watching it for the first time or just want it to get spoiled for you here as we go. Follow Mike Bloom at a Mike Bloom type on the internet. I'm at Round Howard. Mike Bloom, anything else?
I can't wait for season 3. This has been such a fun experiment so far. It does feel a little bit like we're sitting in the Pearl, just kind of sending podcasts up the pneumatic tubes. But unlike the Pearl Station, which was revealed, it just leads to a big old landfill in the middle of the jungle. Hopefully you all are receiving these podcasts right now and enjoying them.
We love it. Make sure you are subscribed, all that good stuff, and come back next week, you all, everybody, as we dive in to season 3 of Lost. Until then, everyone, take care. Bye.